Governor jackass.
It's about currency.
Yeah.
Protecting your price.
Hot mic.
Customers need your price on it.
Ruined your career on the budget committee.
Yeah.
I don't think it's getting any
I
nominations.
stayed away from
Governor.
classes in my master's program.
Hi, how we doing?
Good.
The time? Oh, it is.
Time flies.
Time flies, exactly.
You need to vote.
I guess I can take this off too.
Yeah, you don't stand on
Oh, look.
sound. There are worse problems to have.
Yeah, I guess so.
All right.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to call the meeting to order. So calling to order this meeting of the Hopkinton Budget Committee, January 12th, 2022 at 5:30 PM. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Tom, could I ask you to do that?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of our meeting on December 8th, 2021. And we'll have a motion to approve.
Second.
And moves, every second, thank you. Are there any questions or clarifications or corrections in the minutes? Nice job, Cindy. Thank you. Okay, then we'll call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Wonderful, thank you. I'm gonna make a slight change to the order of the agenda tonight to allow Ken Trom, assisted by Neil, to provide an update on the town's budget before we move on to the school budget. Thank you to the school folks, administration officials and board members and students for hanging on for a few minutes to accommodate the town first. And so with that, let's go to you, Ken.
Sure.
And Ken, I think I'm just gonna pass you one of these mics just so people can hear you. Hard enough without the mask, even harder with.
I'd love to take it off, but thank you for accommodating us, Mark. Let me start with the okay. Since we last presented to this committee on December 8th, the select board has had more time to consider your comments and has had several more meetings and discussions, including with the Houston Barn Committee. So what we have concluded is that among the alternatives of barn stabilization, barn rehabilitation, remove the barn and replace in the same site, remove the barn and replace on a new site, or none of those options, we unanimously decided to propose to town meeting to go forward with the barn stabilization option with an estimated cost of $875,000. We felt this option is required at this time to stabilize the barn before additional damage occurs. The hope is that with grants and donations that can be obtained in the future, we'll go towards barn rehabilitation. So how to pay for the stabilization. In terms of how to pay for the estimated $875,000 cost, following significant discussion, we decided to use the $603,000 of American Rescue Plan funds combined with a bond of $272,000. This decision was not reached easily, but the thought was that one-time monies from ARPA should not be used for ongoing operating budget expenses, but should be used for this one-time expense. The downside of this decision is that the $200,000 of ARPA funds we had planned to use in the 2022 budget must now be raised from taxpayers. However, on the plus side, we had included $70,000 in the town facilities maintenance trust barn, and we don't have to include that now. So in terms of the overall tax rate, the select board is now proposing for 2022 is an increase of 53 cents or 8.03%. As to the proposed $272,000 bond, while the cost of it won't hit until 2023, the estimate for a 10-year maturity with a 2% interest rate, the annual cost would be about $30,000 or 3 to 4 cents on the tax rate. So I just wanted to point out what's a significant change and a significant decision by the select board as a follow-up to where we were a month ago. So are there any questions on this part of the presentation?
Just, I apologize for not having been at the meeting, but what was the thinking about stabilization versus, I don't remember what the fourth option was called?
Rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation, yeah, versus the 1.7.
The thought would be that once we do the stabilization, it's going to be much more possible that we'll be able to get grants or donations
Okay,
further along.
try to raise the money to make up the difference or get some of that other stuff done.
Yes, the most essential are under barn stabilization.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just that fire suppression that I get hung up on, but not having that. For reasons that we already discussed, but just based on the value of the properties around it, it just seems like. But anyway, okay, thank you.
And I would think that would probably be among the first items once we get additional funding.
Yeah, thank you.
Just one quick question. Is there a lease plan or somebody that would be like in charge of managing the fundraise for those projects?
You're probably getting ahead of us.
Right.
I would look to potentially the barn committee, but I can't commit them. I don't know if they've offered to do that. I think they've done some of that in the past.
Okay,
One of their members has done substantial nonprofit fundraising.
okay. Just I didn't expect to set up firm to land, but I'd hate to see us spend the money and then have it kind of languish.
Normal.
Go ahead, please.
Before you allocate, $600,000 for barn, were there other projects in the town that you guys were considering as a one-time expense? Was town hall one of them or anything else like that?
At this point in town hall, we still have 110,000 or so in capital reserves. Address anything that's essential. Certainly at some point, we have to look further at town hall, but I think at this point, I'll say that the barn is a higher priority considering the money we have for town hall.
Ken, did the select board talk further about the grant options that might support the stabilization effort, like the LJ program? And, would we pursue, if this passed, would we still pursue those possibly to help either eliminate the need for the bond or reduce, potentially reduce the ARPA money?
I would say yes, anywhere we can get money as opposed to from taxpayers, we would do that.
The timing for stabilization in those grants,
May not, right.
not quite. So maybe for some of the additional things. But
When would you envision doing the stabilization work if this passes?
I think that this, as soon as it can be scheduled.
Okay, so that's probably makes sense. Other questions for Ken on this?
The other item I just wanted to touch on was the year-end financials, recognizing we are on a calendar year, just finished the year, and from a preliminary perspective, in terms of revenues, we're about 183,000 to the good over budgeted amount, which is about 83,000 more than we were estimating when we put the budget together. So that's to the good. And the main drivers of that are motor vehicle permits, ambulance fees, and transfer station income. On the expense side, we're running very close to budget. And where there are still some invoices that are still outstanding, we're assuming we're going to come in at budget. Any questions on that?
I think it's the closest we've ever run.
I was just
As far
gonna,
as expenses, so.
because I would just comment that that's pretty impressive.
I'd rather we had a couple of 100,000. But
Being accurate's good.
and we've done one.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Neil.
You are well. Well, then, thank you for accommodating us and allowing Neil to get home early.
We're not done.
Very good.
Thank you.
Make sure you're set, Will. I don't get out.
Okay, our next agenda item is the presentation of the Hopkinton School District budget, which I think is going to come in several different phases. There's the operating budget, there's the HES contract, the teacher's contract. For joining us.
Yeah, good. I do have my
And,
partner, I don't know where Neil went. Michelle is online.
Oh, great.
I don't know how
We will,
he brings. It
we will bring her in on the computer if we need to, but you're going to have control of the computer, so.
Okay.
If you want to bring Michelle in at some point, you'll need to bring her over.
I think this one's doing that.
Oh, that one is. Oh, okay.
So, let me know, I can probably forward it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Hey,
Perfect.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Thank you, Norm. All yours. Take
Sure.
it away.
First off, I want to wish you guys happy new year to the budget committee. It's great to be in person and deliver our school board budget. First time I've actually had an opportunity to do this, to actually be in person with you guys, to share our budget with you. Thank you for the community who are watching, to our students who are here paying attention to this budgeting process, and to our chair, Jim O'Brien, to come over to help with the teacher's contract. Over the last year, our goal has been to maintain our students in school, provide an education for them while keeping them safe and being able to meet their needs. And a lot has changed over the last couple of years. As a district, we have been able to maintain a high level of education for our students. And through that whole process has come new leadership. On behalf of the board, O'Brien, our chair, Andrea Folsom, our vice chair, Rob Nato, and Delcy LaPlante, it's great to be able to bring you guys the budget tonight that the board has approved. I'd like to thank all four of them for their service in producing this budget for you guys tonight. One of the things that was exciting about hiring Mike Flynn for this district is a new vision, new ideas. And one of the final tasks for him when we were hiring him was to deliver a budget to us, our last year's budget. And tonight it's my privilege to introduce to you his first budget, Mike, Superintendent of Schools, to the Budget Committee.
Thanks.
So don't dive too far into the notebooks yet. We kind of separated it out to the presentation, then get into this. It's probably a little bit different, so if I'm doing anything wrong, let me know. But I want to make sure that we kind of finish where we started, believe it or not, in October when I first came here, and then I did a little in-between visit. When we started back in October, I said to you, our goal was to maintain as level, if not flat funding, budget as we could. I think we've done a very good job at coming in and hitting that goal. So I won't bore you with the entire thing that we presented to the board a couple of weeks ago. But, you know, I think the main thing about when you're developing a budget is still maintaining high rigor for our students, support for our staff, and making sure that Hopkinton keeps meeting that goal. I use the example with Max A-Frame when he was interviewing me for his podcast. He asked me about things that I wasn't prepared for once I started here. And I said, being a huge Steelers fan, I said, I walked into the Patriots organization. And that was different for me, right? So we're always trying to achieve what the Patriots were doing. And to walk into this type of organization with a supportive board, staff members and students that were already excelling, I had to really flip my lens on, all right, how do we maintain that and continue to achieve greatness? So that's what we kind of did through this budgeting process. I want to make sure that we are continuing to hit our student learning through multiple strategies, along with continuing our best practices and looking for new ways to do it. But more importantly, through my interview process, it became pretty apparent that the board wanted me to evaluate current SAU operations and business practices, right? Where could we improve in that area? And one of them significantly was the budgeting process and how we're going to communicate through the town and so forth and so on. And then it goes back to, as I mentioned, raising the bar and closing the gap. So ensuring that the correct infrastructure is in place. So I've said it to you before, it shouldn't matter who the superintendent is. The district should have goals and infrastructure in place so that whoever steps in continue to pick up that torch and carry the baton, so to speak. So I wanted to make sure that we are continuing to create a tax-friendly budget, but at the same time being able to support our staff and our students to the best capability. I know the word transparency is a bad word here, but I wanted to make sure that we improved multiple steps in the process, right? We had 2 budget work sessions. We had 2 regular board meetings. That's 4 total, completely developed around the budget and discussions. Then throughout, November, it was a standing item on our school board agenda. So it continued to be brought forward. We met with you guys. So it was something that we wanted to continue to discuss rather than it becoming a December wrap up into January type of thing. And what do we got going on? So a couple things you'll see in here: budget drivers, enrollments projected, some significant changes, highlights by the increases. This is the same thing you saw really when I first came here, but that was that crazy number, right? Where everyone panicked and said, I can't believe we hired this guy. But that was an idea of what we are looking for, so that through the multiple years that we come, you say, hey, remember in 2021, now we're checking that box and moving forward. So we're going to get through that. Key things that we're going to continue to emphasize, and when I mentioned that we wanted to stay flat, is that there were things that are out of our control, that we have absolutely no say over what we can and can't do. That's the facility project bond. The second one kicked in. So remember, that's when the town approved the upgrades of the infrastructure and Harold Martin in middle high school and so forth. So that kicks in. Health insurance is always that crazy thing that we talk about, and then special education and related services. So enrollment in education is always a challenge. You can go through NEASC. We do our own internal numbers as well. This is our internal projections. We have a real hard time. We're having a hard time really with Harold Martin. And I think I mentioned this last time I visited you with kindergarten. We believe that a lot of people stayed in paid or private kindergarten for the year because they didn't know how the year would go. So NEASC kind of came in under the projections. We're projecting more than that. So we kind of settled in on a difference of 16. We still think that it's continued growth. We have new housing. I know within the past over break, we had 3 families move in, which was 7 kids. That was just over winter break. So there's stuff going up. I would say Hopkinton's on a growth pattern right now. We also know, I think there was about 7 houses that turned over from people with no families to having students at the start of the school year. And that was within the first week of school. So that one, we're trying to be cautious and safe. And I think we've done that with maintaining some of the things that we'll discuss. So at Harold Martin, just some general supplies, reading materials, transportation. I'm going to focus, and at the end, you guys can ask obviously any questions you'd like. I'm going to focus on at the bottom there, the major changes of an increase of 9,000. We've done a couple different things. We've separated, you'll see, we've separated facilities into its own line, technology into its own. We pulled it out of the building so that the community had an easier way to digest why prices may be increasing or decreasing. And it wasn't specifically tied to a building, right? So energy costs, gas, fuel, all those things. Moving on to Maple Street, iExcel was purchased initially through the Hopkinton Public Schools Foundation, and we wanted to continue that support. It showed great support for our students in the gap of, you'll hear big terms out of education would be learning loss, right? Because of the pandemic, closing the gaps. So that may be between 2nd and 3rd grade. They weren't able to get all the way through content or curriculum because of, in and out of school 1 week, out of school 1 week, in school the next week. So these are some of the things that will help us continue that to make gains with our students. At the middle high school, with upgraded facilities, allows you to do upgraded things in the science labs. So you'll see new labs, new materials that are going to be purchased, physics, science. And then as we continue to work on some of our algebra classes, we have some more consumables that we're looking to get into our students' hands to help with that support. So even with all those major adjustments, you'll notice that on the right, that because there were some decreases as well, that change comes in at about 13,000. Special education, and this is a significant one. So I know Michelle will chime in at some point. The significant change or the decrease, not to get into too many details, but that typically is tied to a student or an outplacement, right? So if Hopkinton has to outplace a student to go somewhere else, they're still our student, but we're paying the cost. So we saw some students graduate and or no longer need that type of support, so that cost comes back. The crazy part about special education for that number was bigger when we first presented. I think we were getting about 462 back, and then that placement changed, and there goes 100,000. So that's the challenge with special education, which is another reason why we're developing a warrant article around special education. And this is where we pulled the facility. I believe previously facility was baked into the buildings before, and we pulled those out so that you can get a better understanding. Really, Michelle does a 5-year average. We had to be careful, obviously, with 2020, right? We were out of the buildings from March until literally almost September. And then last year we were in and out. So in regards to electricity, fuel, and all those projections, we have more square footage at Harold Martin. We have some boilers, older boilers that are bigger, consume more fuel. And we're working on all that, but that change is an increase across the district. 58.8 is every building, every facility, not just a singular one. So this has been a big discussion. So what the district did great was using some of the funds they purchased Chromebooks, right? So essentially we're going to be 1-to-1 by the start of next year. Every student could have a Chromebook if needed, if wanted, so forth and so on. Challenges with that, right? When you buy that many, what's going to happen? They're in students' hands. There's going to be keyboards, screens, things of that nature. So in order to protect ourselves from complete destruction, we put 9,000 in repairs. That I want to be very clear. The questions come that they are not in that type of shape now, right? Chromebooks last for about 5 years. The goal of that 9,000 is to be preemptive on the things that are coming in, the screens. Also, inventory is really challenging. So that will allow us to get ahead of it, but that's not going to be a continued cost. The goal is to develop a warranty program through the schools. The example I use is mine. Where I live, we pay $15 a year per Chromebook, and that covers any breakage, any damage, any replacement. So try to find that cost. My previous district at Timberlane, it was $40 for 3 years. So there's different ranges of a cost, but we want to make sure we're protecting it on the investment that we have. Parent Square is a new communication strategy we've been using. It's how we send messages out to families. We can do texts, we can do posts and emails. So that's where those changes come in. Aspen it's a student information system. It's another way we track data.
Can we ask questions on the way?
Yeah, this is your guys' show. I'm
Just on that, I mean, I'm a parent, so I get Parent Square. Was that an unbudgeted item this year and now it's budgeted? That's why it's not that there's been $5,000 increase in the cost of Parent Square.
correct.
Okay.
We did not have Parent Square until October of this year.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question
Yeah.
back on budget changes. So are those fuel and electricity costs locked in, or are those subject, like, what level of confidence do you have that the increases reflected are what will actually come to fruition?
So those are she uses a 5-year running average. Can we open up the mic by chance, Thomas?
Yeah. Michelle? Is anyone better? Is this Zoom for sure? I'm pretty sure this is. There, you get to move her over.
Can you like double click on?
And then you have to invite her. to panel.
You guys mind if I put her on my phone? You guys are okay with that?
Sure. Yeah, whatever works.
Thank you.
Hang on, Michelle.
I know she hears us.
No good deed goes
Hi. So we're gonna go this way, all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So the question was, and I know this is your area of how confident are you on the fuel charges in your 5-year average that you run?
Oh, yeah, so I actually run a 3-year average. And what happens is the 3-year average is kind of skewed this year because we've had to run our buildings, number one, more than we normally would have in the past because of COVID. So we had to have a little bit of gap with that, as well as adding in Harold Martin with the addition. Now, electricity, we do go out to bid for our supply, and we have a 3-year contract that's good through December 1st of 2023. So while I know the rate we're going to use, it's an estimate on the number of kilowatt hours we'll use. And so it might not be 29,000.
How often have you come close?
We're pretty good on our averages. We also use an energy buying group that actually helps us with our bid process for fuel and electricity. And they're used when I'm looking at our budget as well to make sure that we're not out of whack.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle. Sorry to.
Welcome.
I'm
No problem.
gonna leave you on, okay?
Yes.
All right. So moving to the SAU, the district is some of the things we mentioned earlier. Michelle, you can speak to the single audit, how you think we'll qualify for the first time in quite some time?
Sure. So what happens is when the district spends $750,000 or more in federal funds, which we came very close, I think it was like 730,000 for the fiscal year that we just ended. we actually have to have a single audit when it goes over that 750,000. So when you do that, there's more testing, which means there's an increase in cost that we have from the auditors.
Okay,
Want me just to go on with the legal part while I'm talking?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the legal has to do with, I think the majority, maybe all of the budget committee might be aware of a lawsuit that is against the state for adequate funding for school districts. And the school district in Hopkinton has decided to join with that suit. And so that costs us about $10,000 estimated a year. It's all based on what is done in actual expenses and our share of that. We have not come close to even spending $10,000 this year, but that was the estimate that was given to us.
Okay, in the e-finance, we upgraded at the end of last year. If you remember, we upgraded. What version were we at to where we are now?
We were at 19.4. We're at 20.11. We're soon to be having the student activities being able to be added onto e-finance, as well as an upgraded Cognos reporting to go to Cognos 11, I believe.
Okay. That 140 in the bond is the second payment that kicks in, along with the interest. And then if you remember back in October, we said our goal as a district was to get away from fund balance. You remember that discussion? So we're going to try and we need to take it increments on how to get away from fund balance. And one of the things that the district had done previously is put a single dollar in the line for food service and then paid food service out of fund balance each year. So in order to begin to start protect us, we need to appropriately budget for food service. So food service is roughly $150,000 a year. But in order to do it appropriately, we're going to do it in a 2-year span. So we're going to budget for $75,000 this year and then $75,000 next year, which would then appropriately fund food service each year rather than paying out of it from fund balance, since we're getting rid of fund balance. Does that sound right, Michelle?
Yeah, because what we have to do in those cases, in those past years, is we actually, in some cases, have to freeze the budget to make sure that we have enough money to cover the food service deficit, as well as the amount of fund balance that the board has decided to use during the budget process.
So we're working toward a bottom line budget, which will take 2, if not 3 years to get completely away from fund balance budget. Okay?
I just have a question before you move on.
Yeah.
Just on the lawsuit that we're joining, are we suing to try to get the state to do something, or are we suing to actually get damages? Like if the lawyers prevail on this suit, would we get an award and maybe attorneys fee, like potentially, or is it just trying to get the state to adequately fund, like trying to ask the courts to tell the state to fund education in a more fair and better way?
So I might speak to you, or Norm, were you there when we joined the lawsuit?
Yeah, we both were.
Yeah, we're the who's the lead?
Forget his name.
Do you remember who the lead? Yeah, Conval's the lead.
Yeah, Conval.
And then they recruited districts and
Right.
board approved to join the suit against the state for inadequate funding
Right.
per pupil. So I'm not fully engulfed in it, but I
Jim
believe
can
it's
help me with this.
Well-
He came twice, correct? He came the first time to join in on the suit with Conval, and then he came back the second time, in which this is where we had to start budgeting for 9,400. I'm not sure about the.
Yeah, so the suit would, if we prevail in the suit, then the state would have to redo how it, what it describes as inadequate education, would have to increase the form, our work would increase the formula that Hopkinton get. And so I think they're asking for both relief, so past relief for funding that hasn't been allocated, and then change the formula for future funding.
Okay.
Does this go back to the Claremont type?
Oh, yeah.
Where
100%,
rich towns
yeah.
basically subsidize the poor towns?
Yep, yep, yeah.
And the state, the courts threw that out originally. Yep. Now we're back trying to do that again.
Yep.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
I guess I'm just wondering, at the end of the day, if we prevailed, is it possible that the state would have to pay our legal fees?
I believe it's in there. I'd have to,
Potentially, you don't get it very often, but it just is not possible.
and it was broken down by percentage, right? So lead versus as we got down, it was, the amount you pay was per size and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Can I say one more thing? Just if it's of interest to the budget committee, we had done a couple of years ago an analysis of what the adequacy payments mean to the town of Hopkinton and what we took those as an adequate education, what the state tells us is the cost of adequate education, actually what we could fund with those dollars. And so we have an analysis on what we could fund in the town of Hopkinton with the state adequacy formula, which is I would say it's a school district that you wouldn't recognize and actually probably wouldn't even function. We would have trouble hiring teachers and retaining staff with the numbers. So we can share that analysis with the budget committee because I think it'll help you and maybe the community understand why we're invested in this lawsuit. Because what we receive in terms of adequacy payments doesn't even scratch the surface of what it costs to even maintain the building.
So how much more money are we going for?
Well, I don't think the lawsuit's asking for a dollar amount. I think it's asking the state to re-examine what it means by adequate and come up with a formula that has sort of I would call this straight face test to actually compensate communities for the cost of education.
It is the largest lawsuit that's ever gone before. Typically, it's been a single district here or a single district there, and you just get so overwhelmed with the findings. I mean, what we've had to pull. And now I think Michelle, is there 15 of us? Is somewhere.
Yeah, 15 to 20, I
15
think.
to 20 of us involved in the loss.
And I do, just to comment for a second, I mean, I do think it's important because as we struggle every single year with the increased burden on taxpayers in the town, we always talk about the lack of state funding.
Yep.
Which then goes on to the individuals in the town that have to incur that. So I mean, I do strongly agree with being part of this.
We are ranked dead last in the United States for funding public education.
For 3,700, is that what it is per pupil?
3710.
And it's supposed to go down, my understanding, the next couple of years, from what I read. So
I agree wholeheartedly, and I'm so glad that we're part of this. And what Jonathan just shared. My question is, those districts that are participating in the lawsuit, do they have an opportunity to voice what they feel, what they deem to be inadequate?
So Jim sent the letter on behalf of the board, I believe, right?
Yeah, so the analysis I spoke of was part of the, I'm not a lawyer, Jonathan. It's not an dispute, but we put it into the evidence. So the districts all each did an analysis, which ended up as part of the evidence that part of the lawsuit.
Perfect, John.
We were the second district to join on, I believe, at the time. So we had won the second one.
Does this lawsuit go against the Board of Education or does it go against the state of New Hampshire?
It's the state of New Hampshire.
Okay, so this might force the discussion of an income tax or some other tax like that. So
My guess is that wouldn't be the function, like the function of the lawsuit would be to say you're not properly funding education, it would be up to the state how to pay.
but the end result, if you're going to try to fund this, it's not, you have the
Gotta come
fight
from
of
somewhere.
taking money from the rich towns and giving it to the poor towns versus a broader approach to it, which would be income tax, I assume.
One more quick question. This may not be, able to be answered right now, but is this being publicly put out there? Is it being publicized? I think other towns and I think that the public need to know that this is happening so that they can start making their own changes also. People have had these discussions for years, as we've said, that we know the burden is upon the taxpayer. And I would really hope that some of this is able to be put out there publicly, that this is what is happening and that some action is starting to be taken.
Yeah, they solicited everyone that wanted to participate, and it's the largest number that they've ever had. There have been a few people that have dropped out. because of continual money and as findings. I mean, we've spent hours out of our office having to put stuff together. All right, that's, so.
Maybe just be.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, it is out there and it's continued. So as we update, we'll be updating at board meetings for sure.
And we've had him come and do a presentation and talk to the board. He came back a second time on our agenda to discuss, for an update on it, so.
Follow up on Deb's idea, though, maybe it's time to put that in the schools to annual report that this action is being taken. It would satisfy, because most people don't know about this, I don't think. I happened to be at the meeting that time, when they made the presentation.
I would say once, yes, but I would like to be able to share what is actually going on other than just findings right now. That's all we're doing on our end. And there's nothing like no date set, no nothing. So once there's something of substance, I would say, here's where we are, what we're doing. Because if not, it's just going to be questions that we don't have answers to. So.
But just to piggyback on what you're saying, Don, I do think a presentation at town meeting, when you present the budget, it would be an important point of emphasis that the lawsuit exists and the reason for the lawsuit, as opposed to like where it is structurally, but just that, there's a proactive thing that's happening here in an attempt to try to be a little more fair in how state dollars are being allocated.
Sure. Have we done that before at all?
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Have we done that at all?
No, I don't recall us doing a present. I mean, that's something we can bring back to the board to discuss and see how they feel. We went over our warrants last night, and of course, there's a section in there for any other news or stuff like that. So we can discuss it with the board and get back to you guys on what we'll do.
I mean, one more step too, though. I'm saying there's coalitions out there. And before elections, people need to be aware of people who are in support of carrying on these things and helping the taxpayers and those who are not. And I'm just thinking this is another way of maybe spurring different ideas come voting time, that it really does make a difference.
I would agree, because the public awareness, while you can't necessarily write into a courtroom with public comment, it can drive folks to like write into the state or something and increase pressure on state legislatures. It's a worthwhile thing to make public that we're doing.
Okay. Bring it back. Yeah.
I agree with what you're doing and support it. What Dawn had said is sort of in the past, it's been a fight between the haves and have-not towns. Are there any towns that are opposing this?
No, but there are a lot of people that don't want to invest in it either. So they're watching, right? That's why you only had 15, 20, you didn't have the whole state because of individuals have gone before and it's failed. So, there's a test of fortitude here in regards to this type of lawsuit. Like Claremont has been going on forever. So we'll see what's going on.
Well, it sounds like you're getting some guidance or a request, at least from multiple budget committee members, to somehow weave the story in when you present the budget. This is a line item in the budget. It's part of an increase. It's worth somehow bringing in the what are we doing and why. And so that's.
We can bring it back.
For that.
We can bring it back and get feedback from the board and how we want to proceed. That's great.
All right. So all those positions we brought to you at the beginning in October, these are the ones that we have finalized to work with. We're going to continue to support numeracy program. We increased that this year through ESSER, and now we're going to continue that program. We saw a lot of growth in the math with the students who were struggling. So we're going to continue with that.
Mike, just for presentation, is that a dash or a minus?
That's just a dash.
Okay.
Yep.
It looks like a minus. I would change it.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to change. There used to be an admin assistant for Department of Student Services, which is special ed. That was a program that a position that someone had held forever and then started working half-time. And then kind of was able to do it at the same time as halftime, but now that person's gone, obviously you use the quality of the candidate and we need the time back. More specifically, the state has put more onto us in regards to filing with Medicaid, Medicare, all that type of stuff to continue to refund our money. So the return on investment and return on investment will obviously cover that. And then at the high school, middle high school, it's the administrative assistant. That office is open all year round. Those people need support for registering and scheduling and all that. So adding those, I think it's another 6 weeks of work. That would be that cost. So at the end, overall, we are up 580,410, which is a 2.64 increase. And I think the next slide is probably one of the more important ones. So our operating budget is up 38 cents, but of those 38 cents, 21 cents is the second bond payment kicking in. And then the 9 cents is the $75,000 that we're going to begin to budget appropriately for food services. So really my budget, my operating budget, my school budget is up 8 cents. That was what, with those positions and reevaluating and auditing our budget, I'm up 8 cents. The 21 and the 9 were automatic fix. Well, we could adjust the food service, but that's where that number comes in. Jonathan, I see your hand.
Yeah, just I just wanted to go back, the staffing budget changes. That's the total increase in staffing we're talking about?
That would be the increase in cost, yes.
So that's a little less than one FTE, right? Like isn't an FTE, if I remember correctly, an FTE is like,
Yeah, so that was the
like 100,000 or
practice
something.
with FTEs, and I am no longer going to speak to that.
Okay,
That's why we're trying to get away from the fund balance, and every year it seemed like in my research, it was always FTE 0.6, 0.4. What we need to get to is a bottom line budget, and what the school board approves and what you approve is a bottom line number, and then I fit all those people in there, right?
okay.
So, and I'm just saying.
No, it's
trying-
good education
I'm just
on,
trying to shift
way
away
to think
from
about
that thought process of always putting a number or FTE on people. So that number, I honestly don't even know what the FTE number was previously.
but this is the total staffing.
That's the total staffing increase, yes.
Okay.
That was approved by the school board.
I guess the reason that I asked the question is because I'm thinking back to the first slide of the increase in students.
Yep.
And so this doesn't seem like a huge staffing increase to me. So I'm
Right.
just thinking,
So I was able,
just in my own head, I'm thinking, so that means bigger class sizes?
no, that's a great question. That means I've done a deep dive into our budget and found.
Trimming fat.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay,
And not that, but I was able to move what was being used there, we weren't using, and then move that money back into people or whatever it may be.
okay,
So it was a total reevaluation of what we're doing, what we're spending, how we're using it.
okay,
And this is where we've come.
okay.
we want to,
Thank you.
we want to discuss that this is coming out of ESSER funds. So this is,
Some of it was, yeah.
yes.
Yep.
So.
Yeah,
Okay, thank
what was
you.
the total amount of ESSER funds being used?
it was,
Michelle, what was the total amount of ESSER funds being used on these positions?
The positions that slide is on, there's no ESSER funds being used on those.
So there's no ESSER funds, okay.
No.
Okay,
we left that out.
we left it, okay, perfect.
Yeah, so out of the budget, right, I came to you about a fourth grade teacher previously. We've decided to use ESSER funds to keep that teacher in place for another year, right? To keep those class sizes down, direct instruction, things of that nature. These are the positions that we need to continue to support, right? And we want to make sure we're balancing ESSER so that it doesn't become automatically into a budget, right? We want to make sure we're targeting that. Hopefully, some of the things that we're using with ESSER, we'll close that gap and we move on. So that's where that comes out.
So ESSER funds are one-time funds.
We have we have 2 years left, Michelle, to spend our ESSER.
So some we have to 2023 and some I think we have to 2024.
In the presentation, is there a separate section that shows how much you'll be using of ESSER funds in 2022?
We have a live document on our website that shows every dollar we're using with ESSER funds, but it's not part of the budget. I guess that's where my confusion is.
Okay, and that's sort of my question is, you're using one-time funds, whether it's over 1 year, 2 years, whatever. But at some point, is it going to become such that it has to go into the operating budget? And what's the potential dollar magnitude?
I guess I don't look at it that way because if I'm, right now, my goal is to close gaps on education, support that. So if we're doing our job right, let's just say one of those reading specialists, right? So if the reading specialists and all of us do our job where we're seeing the students catch up, relearn, and I won't need that position to so I guess I don't look at it that way. Meaning the ESSER funds aren't automatically coming into my budget for the following years. My goal is to use ESSER to help support the loss or whatever may be, but not become a withstanding item in the budget. So I don't think, I guess I kept saying it to Norm, and I mean this sincerely. Norm kept saying, well, this was going to become that. And I said, no, that's not accurate. I don't want that. I actually don't want that to become part of our budget. I want to be able to use it as the supplement we have, but not make whatever I'm using it with I never say, well, then we'll just put it in the budget next year. I have the opposite thought. I want to use ESSER to do its job and target, and then continue to use it as a supplement. So I guess that's, Ken, I don't mean it other than that just because we're using what ESSER is going to show up here at the table next year. I guess that's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I was trying to see if there was an inconsistency with what the town is doing.
Oh, okay. I can meet with you on that if you want in my office. But that document of what we're spending our dollars is right on the website for how we're using. Perfect example is we had a teacher, and we needed to support another teacher this year because of something that had occurred. And we were able to use ESSER for that, right? So that helps support that, but once that resolves itself, we're not going to continue to pay. Does that make sense? So we're trying to use ESSER totally appropriately so that it doesn't become a withstanding item.
Okay, fine, thank you.
And if we use ESSER, a public hearing is posted, people attend, the board hears what's being asked, and then the board approves it. And once it's approved, it's withdrawn on that online spreadsheet. So it's publicly noticed and all that stuff whenever we use ESSER.
I have a question about the FTEs. The format in the booklet that you gave us here has each department broken down, or each program broken down by FTEs. Are we going to continue with this system?
So we're still upgrading our system.
Okay.
As I try and rebuild things and transition, there wasn't value. We still haven't totally swapped all of our stuff over. So the form this year was safer to stay with what everyone knows and is aware. We're changing our vocabulary and how we discuss it. So next year you'll probably see different documents.
And in terms of new hires, did the school board opt not to hire the curriculum director and the facility director in this budget cycle?
So that's going back to trying to get towards a bottom line budget, meaning we don't want to talk about positions every year. It becomes kind of a problem with our culture within our building. If you're talking about a fifth grade teacher, then every fifth grade teacher, that's all they're thinking about, literally all the way through the budget process. Am I going to lose my job? Am I not going to lose my job? But then adding positions, that discussion isn't going to always be here, right? So if this budget's approved and all those numbers in there and I can afford it, then that's my job as a superintendent to say that's what's best for our district and we're going to support that. So they didn't say no to me, but they said kind of what Jonathan said, where can you find it with what you got already? So I'm in the process with Michelle on where do we have excess, or where can we shift, and how can we support it that way?
So how does the budget committee get involved with, how do I say this? In the past, we've kind of said, okay, we don't want any more hires because we don't want our insurance to go up over time. We don't want the growth in salaries to go up over time. So how does the budget committee in the new future arrangement address those issues?
So it's my understanding the budget committee oversees the tax rate, correct? But that's my interpretation. As a budget committee, we oversee our budget, the overall tax impact and how it affects to the taxpayers. In this situation, we have guided the superintendent of schools and said, this is the percentage we're looking for in your budget, and this is the impact it has. It's his job to run the district. We have inputted him with all our wants, what we'd love to see in the district. And he's the one that has the knowledge and the expertise to meet the needs of our students. And there's a slide that I will show you after Jim speaks that will show you the impact of all these changes that we'll dig into on what I feel what the budget committee will be looking at, saying, is this reasonable for the taxpayers and to fund our schools? When we get into the weeds, Rich, that you're talking about, and we want to unpack, what would happen if there was a reduction or anything like that, or maybe the budget committee wants to increase. There's many different questions we can go and discuss it when it comes to positions that would change over time.
I think there's another way to answer that as well. Meaning eventually all of my reworkings are going to become clearer. And then there's going to come a point where I'm going to say to the board, my board and this board, like, I can't find it anywhere else. Now I need to say, we need this and that, right? So it's not that we're not going to present new hires. It's just, we need to reevaluate what we were doing previously. How do we reconstruct what we're doing? And then once that becomes a fluid and maybe we're maxed out, that's when that comes. Like, there will be times in the future that if that comes about, but there was money that we were able to reallocate and readjust, that we were able to move towards certain things.
And I want to add one more thing is it's a different mentality for me is for my third budget. Every time I've come here, we've always discussed positions, and we've always discussed, this is the position that's going to be cut if we don't have the budget amount at this amount. It's completely changed. And ask Mike, it took me a long time to get there because, that's the way I was kind of trained as a board member. And then I started to go back to the position that I am, as a controller. I give out a budget. Someone else runs that budget. If there's a change in that budget that exceeds it or something that changes that I didn't specifically want, I'm going to fire the person. If they exceed it or if they don't listen to what I want, I'm not going to fire you, Mike. I'm just saying, we're the board, he's the CEO. He has the budget, he has to meet the needs of our students. And
we did it this year. We started at, believe it or not, they gave me a target at I think at $1.51 is what we started at. That was my initial target. And that's when I found positions, here's this, here's that. And then as they worked through it, they said, all right, we want it at 130. So then that I went back and cut whatever it is, reallocate. And then they gave me the new number of I think it was 125 is the final number that they settled on. So I was able to figure out with Michelle what we can do, what we can't do, what we need to really ask for, because it's going to be, so those positions essentially that are in here that are increases, I couldn't allocate the money for it. So we need to discuss it. So I'm, in regards to the curriculum position and the other positions, I don't know if we'll have the money, but it'll be my job to figure out where we can find it if it fits in the budget.
Thank you. Sorry for the long-winded answer.
Yeah, I know. I felt that too. It's not going away. We're just trying to shift how we look at it. Meaning, next year, if they say you need to cut, let's say you need to cut $150,000 out of it, then I need to figure out what is it a position? Is it a program? And all those things.
You go back one slide, Mark.
Don, forgive me. I would just want to continue on this for just a minute, please.
Which one am I on? You want to continue on?
I
this?
don't need, it doesn't matter. It's irrespective of the slide. It's more on this. So, I want to just remind everyone the purpose of the budget committee, which is not just about tax rate. It's to assist voters in the prudent appropriation of public funds. And prudent appropriation, I think, implies the budget committee understanding enough about what is in the budget, how the budget's constructed, what is in it, what the priorities are, that we can either support and present that budget in agreement with the school and or the town at town meeting, or present our own budget. So I just would say, I think it's a little bit more than just the tax rate.
I agree with
all due respect. And there has been, I think in my years on the budget committee, I think I'm in my 6th year, I can't remember. There's been a spectrum of views on how granular to get into specific line items. So I wouldn't say that the budget committee as a whole has had one perspective or another on that. There's been a spectrum of views. Many of people in this group have been on the budget committee for years, and you know that. And I really like the direction you're going in. I feel much more comfortable not having specific positions, especially those that may be cut depending upon, bottom line budget decisions up there. I do think that is your job as the superintendent, and you're going to give a budget, and we trust you to do the right thing with it. And that said, this example that you brought up, Rich, I think it's worth this committee understanding if your hope and intention, Mike, would be, if I can find the funds, my hope and intent, my hope would be to hire a curriculum director or a facilities director or both. That's good for us to understand it. To me, it's less about, does it show up with a dollar figure by it, and more about what is your hope if you're able to find those funds. I think that helps the budget, because they're going to come from somewhere if you did that. And so the budget committee should understand that that's something that matters to you. And it's because otherwise, if you had that money and you didn't do that, the budget could be lower, right? If you're saying, it's really not about trimming the fat in my mind, it's about priorities, and you saying, I think that this, facilities director could be a higher and better use of that $100,000 than somewhere else it is being spent right now. And so I think that's helpful information for the budget committee to understand. And so not so much about FTEs, but more about intention and priorities, and just being open about that.
And that's why I've enjoyed my multiple meetings with you, right? So you got
That's
this in October with it's a wish list, right? I had a wish list. We were up, what, 7.5%, whatever it was. That was a wish list. And we had those discussions on the value of what those people were. And then working with my board, and I love granular. I can talk about the pencils we buy if you want. Like, I have no problem with that.
Please no.
But I know, but when we talk about trimming fat, I think this year is going to feel different for everyone, right? It felt different for my board, my administrative staff. It's going to feel different for you. But next year, I think the discussion maybe around bottom line and position is where I don't feel the opportunity that I can find it within the budget that there is, right? I just took a lens of, well, why are we doing that? We don't need that. I can move that here. Where next year, you're going to see who I was and what we did. And then it might be, let's just say I don't find the money for curriculum coordinator. Next year, it might be like, this is why it's going up. Here is the major cost, because I wasn't able to find it. And now we really needed to drive the instruction. So I appreciate that take, Mark, but whatever you guys need, I'm just trying to shift everyone away from trying to put people on the chopping block or programs.
Thumbs up.
Really understand that if you give me $20, how am I going to spend it, right? How am I going to spend that money to make sure our kids are succeeding and achieving? I'm hoping that you trust me as the operator, that I'm spending it appropriately. If not, fire me.
No, and Mark,
Thank you.
the clarification, I think, one thing we said when we came here for our first presentation, what it looked like when it was all in, we had said to you guys at some point through multiple years, we're hoping to have some of these positions in our budgeting process at some point. But that's something Mike has to figure out when's the right time based on what the current state of the Hopkinton School District is. And that's why it was important for us as a board. We sat down with every single leadership team member, and they all made a case for what they were looking for their building. And we listened. It went through us. It was a whole different budgeting process. So like what you guys did to the select board, you listened to Chief before and all that. And a lot of them, like curriculum directors, some mentioned other positions in there. We all dissected it. We all talked about in the board meeting what we'd all like to see. And quite frankly, if we had gone down the count of that, I think it was the 8% increase. So instead of doing that 8% increase, we came to a budget increase, which we thought would be respectful to the taxpayers and also enough for Mike to run the district.
And this year is also going to look different, because you're going to hear from Jim in a second. The priority was the contracts. That was the priority for this year. That they are the most important piece to this district is the human beings that work with our kids every day. So the support staff and the teachers. So we knew where those contracts were going to settle. We had a good idea, and we wanted to make sure that became the priority, and not all my wish lists. Well, he wants it all. He wants that. So we wanted to make sure that we were appropriate with Mike. You really got to dive deep into that and see if you can find it within, because this is not the year to try and ask for more. So that's where we were. I know. Did you want me to go back, Mr. Houston?
No, it's fine.
I would appreciate if he went back, just because you went over it so quickly. Thank you.
I got the right number.
Okay. And This is not in your packet, but we can send it to you. We emailed it to Mark. I believe we emailed it to you today.
If it's in the
If you
town
want to
has
share
it.
it to them, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
It's in there. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, they got it.
Thank you.
Yep. So Michelle, can you hear me? I know we lost you there for a second.
I can hear you.
Do you want to go over your slide? Can you see it?
Yeah, well, you know what? We'll go over it because it's part of the budget bulletin.
Okay, so we'll skip it
So
for
it's the
now.
exact same thing in there, so we'll go over it a little bit later.
Okay. Just again, kind of what I said, it's been a change for everyone from the minute I stepped in here to moving the process up, to new timelines, new expectations, new way of thinking of what you're evaluating. So another thank you to the board for having patience with me, the administrative staff and the teaching for all stepping up, because we've hit every deadline we've needed to, and it's been a pretty good process. So this is in your packet, and I don't know if, I think I can minimize that. So this is Norm's slide.
Yeah, I want to speak to that after Jim presents the teacher's contract, or do a way they can get.
Sure.
Yeah,
Wait, before, sorry, can we ask one question?
Yeah, yeah, of course. You're right.
Sorry, I wanted to dive into the food service,
Yep.
but I wanted to wait. Okay, so the food service, I'm trying to figure out why the food service keeps becoming such a complicated issue, like it just becomes a weird blob that moves around.
Yep.
So the food service is paid with federal funds, we just have to allocate it into the budget, and that's the problem?
Nope.
Okay.
Michelle, did you hear the question? Okay, so okay, essentially, we're trying to clarify the food service
Right.
and how we got to where we are.
Or just how the food service works.
Yeah, so what happens is that, well, let's set aside the years that the federal government pays for every student to have breakfast and lunch. What happens is the government only pays a certain amount per meal anyway. And so it might cost us more than that to produce them. And then in the non-year where everybody isn't free, then we have to deal with the ups and downs or ebbs and flows of who's taking lunch and who's not taking lunch. Now, I will tell you that one of our issues is also, and I did a study, and 17 years now, so I want to say it's probably at least 10 years ago. To really look at food service, figure out what it was, or what issues there are that might be causing us to have a deficit where other school districts don't. One thing I can tell you in my study was that we have all the costs of food service in the food service budget, whereas a neighboring district has the food service director in the general fund budget, which in my opinion is not accurate because that's not telling you how much the food service program is costing. So they'll be lower automatically by whatever the benefits and salaries are of the food service director in the food service area. Another thing I don't want to say against us because I do like our free building, but having 2 elementary schools with 2 kitchens, that's not where you make your money in a district for food service. You really do it more at the upper level of the middle of high school. So that is another factor. We did talk about should we do it out of one building and not another. It really can't be done. You still need staff for transporting and delivering to students. And so those are just a few factors that I just want to point out. Now this year, we might do a little bit better than what we've done in the past because number one, the government's paying 100% for everybody and we're all in. Whereas last year we were not all in at all one time. The other thing is the government is actually paying more per meal. So I don't know what will happen in the year after. I don't think we'll have free yet, but I don't know if they'll adjust down their per meal charge that they reimburse us at. So what we do have to do though, just so that everybody knows, people that we do have meals for that have to pay. And so I do have to do what's called the PLE tool every year. And so that determines whether we need to look at increasing our rate or not. And what it does, it takes aside our expenses and it nets effect into it as to our counts. And it takes in the federal revenue. And in the past, we've had to continually increase, not every year, but again, it's all based on the tool that we use from the government. And it gives us the guide for charging. So I hope that helps.
And I'm gonna make it a little bit simpler. Meaning if, to eliminate this year, they're fully funding this year. So every meal that's produced, they're fully, the government's fully funding. On a non-year, we may charge $1.75 for a milk, food, fruit, but it actually costs $2.50 to produce, right? So we're losing money on every meal. And then you have to add it, and that's what she's talking about, the formula to adequately charge and what we're charging. And the other part she's talking about is you make little to no money at the lower elementary levels, where at the middle high school, maybe some kids aren't going, they're bringing their own lunch, but then they're going and buying a bag of chips, you know, so forth and so on. So that's where some revenue comes in. So that's where I mean, the majority of districts, I mean, I don't want to say all, but close to a lot operate at a deficit.
Right, and it's sad, right, so, yeah, so there, and it also seems like it varies a lot in terms of how many people are taking the meals. It also varies a lot how much the government's gonna pay for the meals. And then that produces a relatively unpredictable swing in terms of the budget you need to put into it. So is that why in the past, it's been a part of outside of the operating budget and been kind of in a more general fund so that you can more easily adjust for those swings?
That's Michelle. Did you hear that one?
Yeah, so you have to budget for food service 100%, but you have to, you know, in your budget. But if you want to have it be that the district's gonna pay for some of the deficit, because in the past years, we haven't had the district pay, we've had $1 in that line, because that's the only way the district can pay to cover the deficit. And we have to cover the deficit every year.
So it sounds like, so
that's
basically we
why
were
we're
budgeting,
money so that I don't have to have departments freeze their budget. If we have everything else, salaries and benefits, you know, salaries and benefits aren't at budget, then that's some of where we can get our money without having a frozen budget for supplies or things like that. But if that is at budget, then that's where it gets a little tricky of how are we going to pay for the food service deficit if we only have $1 in the budget.
so we've budgeted for the expense, but not the taxpayer funded revenue. And we ended up essentially just covering it with fund surplus each year, right? Or, so, and that's, I mean, that's what was done. You're trying to change that. You want it to be more visible, even though it's unpredictable what that deficit will be that needs to be funded with taxpayer money.
I mean, I want to be, I mean,
If you're trying to make it more transparent.
yes, essentially you're rolling the dice every year, hoping that you have fund balance to pay for the food. As Michelle's saying, if that number wasn't coming in to match up, then department budgets, everything else got penalized because you had to pay for food service on irrelevant.
Right.
That's correct.
Can I just add one thing that I forgot to actually talk about, and I know some numbers are new. And we haven't really talked about this for a while. So when I talked about the history, we also did look at outsourcing. And that was not going to be a savings for us. And so that's why we need to move in that direction. So in case someone's wondering if we go in a different direction, like some districts do outsource food service, we did look at that and that was not feasible.
To give you an example, in Hampstead, where I came from, we outsourced to Fresh Picks. So we paid them, right? And the interesting part is you pay them and they take the coverage of what it costs to produce and what we charge. And then where we ended up getting hit was because the students paid the district for the lunches, right? And then we got hit a lot on unpaid lunch balances, right? And that number crept up to $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 on unpaid lunches. So there's different pros and cons to how we do it. We are totally internal. We pay our own food service people, our own, all that. So it's another one of those issues, honestly, in schools, that's almost like a no-win.
Is this similar to like the special ed fund? We have a fund when you don't know how many kids are coming in and how many are going out. You have a fund that you can draw from when you need to. Food service, if you can't determine what it's going to be any given year, you need some place to get money out to cover that, and that's what you've been doing out of the fund money.
Correct. Yes, and that's what, if I'm trying to get away from fund balance, we're not gonna rely on fund balance for anything, right? That's gonna go away. So what I ask for is what I intend to spend. And if we need to get to protecting ourselves with the food service, we need to start budgeting for it. So that's that transition away from fund balance to now protecting ourselves. We may come back next year, and that was another reason we decided to separate it instead of going all in at 150 and doing 75, because we may come back next year and say, all right, here's the new trajectory. Now we might not need that. So it was a calculated, I'll call it a calculated risk.
Instead of being $150,000 transferring over here, if you can fine tune this more, it might be 75,000, and you'd still need 75,000 somewheres to be able to bring in to cover that.
Correct.
So you may need to still be able to come in out of the fund balance, if you will, or some other kitty of money to allow you to cover that,
Yeah,
because it's so variable.
and the unintended consequence is, you know, it was great that the federal government decided to fund the lunch program again this year, but it also is gonna, we don't know what it's gonna reset to. Are kids now going to just expect they want hot lunch every day and come to school? Or are parents gonna start making lunch again? It's still gonna change that traffic pattern of when they're not paying for it and what the rate will be. Do you know what the rate might be, Michelle, for next year for lunches?
I don't, we all actually were pleasantly surprised that we were actually getting more than what we were supposed to get. And nothing was given to us as to background as to whether that's a temporary thing or permanent. We just saw it in our reimbursements.
Yep. I know there's not a great answer there, but.
No, I didn't. So I'm still slightly stuck on the actual mechanism of why it couldn't be on. So before there's budgeted $1, right? Yep. Then the $1 was so that there was nothing budgeted, so that we would then pull it from the general fund? Or
They were pulling it from the fund balance.
from the fund balance?
Correct.
So why don't we have $1 budgeted? Like, why couldn't that be whatever you're projecting towards? Have it budgeted, and then if you go over, then pull it from the fund. Pull the extra.
I'm trying to say this politically correct. That was the previous administrator's way of doing that.
Totally.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're doing things that we are,
Okay, so there's no actual, like, if it's above a certain amount, you have to freeze it in a certain way, just, okay.
Correct. We're trying to get to the right way of budgeting.
we're,
Yeah, right, I just, for some reason in my head, there was like a structural, like, legal reason why you couldn't move things from budgets.
No.
Okay.
If-
So that makes, yeah.
And that, well, that tells you, because now that $75,000 I could use towards a curriculum coordinator, but now it's going towards food, because we need to start getting that way. You know what I mean? Michelle, how long have you held it in place for $1?
Longer than me.
Yeah.
Because at least what you have to have in that line to be able to cover a deficit. I can tell you that since I've been here, I always had more money than $1, but it never made it to the board because of the other area increases. It was always something that was gonna be on the chopping block instead of something that was gonna support kids.
So the goal of the food service is negative. The goal is to not have deficit and not have.
Correct. Yeah.
It's supposed to break.
It should be in the budget, yes.
So but the thing is, because of all these different variables, it can be positive or negative. So you have to have something in there, and then you're pulling out from the fund balance to come for it. So, okay.
It was a way to cut money, but use it another way.
so
But it's always been a deficit. It's
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yes.
so with
The whole
it,
thing never affected the final tax rate.
No, that's my point, is that like the talk of if you have to pull money, it has to come from somewhere else and you have to cut other things, but in the grand scheme of things, it's always the same pot of money. It's the same amount of money. That's why I'm trying to figure out if there's any real problem.
Christine, did you have a?
No. Everything's been covered.
Just a note.
At this point, yeah, thank you.
But, with new pair of eyes, seeing these things in a budget and bringing it to your attention is our job, as a board and as a district. This is one of the things that we had to share is it's a big increase of 9 cents.
Can I ask one more question?
It's-
Need the fourth a little bit?
Yeah.
So on the, in the book, there's a line item for food service, which is $600,000. I was wondering why that number?
What page?
Which page?
It's like this first page, the one that has all of the. Yeah, the first page, if you go down to other funds at the very bottom.
Michelle, can you hear that? All
No,
right, Thomas, can you speak a little louder for her?
Yeah, so, in the booklet, on like the first page, which is, just the approved 2022-23 school board food budget. So at the very bottom, there's other funds, federal projects, then food service. Food service is $600,000, which it was both last year as well. So I was just wondering why that, like, is that like a placeholder number? Because then the actual.
why the federal project's going up to 750?
No, food service. So the last 2 years of expended for food service was like in the $330,000, but budgeted both last year and then also for this year, $600,000.
Yeah, so that's just a placeholder.
Okay.
I mean, could we go, it would be no tax increase because there's $600,000 in revenue.
But you can't spend more than that, so it has to be a big enough number to make sure that
It
you,
has to be a big enough number to have, yeah.
so that you can account for everything.
And we've had some staff changes over the last 2 years, and part of the problem is that in 2021, that year expenses are kind of skewed because we didn't hire 2 positions until very late. I want to say May, because of the fact of the state that we were in because of COVID. So we went the majority of a school year without having 2 employees for food service.
Got it.
And then because we didn't have everybody in all that, you know what I mean? So actually the 2021 expenses are actually very skewed. Because it wasn't 177 days, everybody in.
Good?
I think so.
So where do the extra budgeted costs go?
Nowhere.
Nowhere.
You have to have it on here in order to spend it. So
Okay.
if there was excess things they had to spend, if that number's too small, then you can't spend.
I understand.
Okay. Shall we
So,
go back to you, Norm?
yeah, sure. So I'm happy to say that it's great that we were able to reach an agreement with the teachers on a new contract. And I'd like to say thank you to Andrea Folsom, Jim O'Brien, Michelle, and Mike Flynn. And thank you to the teachers union for really working together in order to come to an agreement. We felt it was appropriate for our chair, Jim O'Brien, who was part of negotiations, to come to the budget committee to share the contract with you guys and answer any of your questions. So at this moment, I'll turn over our chair, Mr. Jim O'Brien. You take a seat over here.
How's everybody doing? I'm your comic relief for this evening. So, no, but thanks for having me. So, thanks, Norm, for the introduction. So I'm going to talk about 2 contracts this evening. So we successfully negotiated 2 contracts, one with our Hopkinton educational support staff, and then one with HEA, the Hopkinton Education Association. I'm going to start by sort of stepping backwards and just talk about how we got here and why we're negotiating 2 contracts in a single year. And then I'll go into some of the details of both those contracts. So if we go back to 2019, so in 2019, we had a successful 3-year contract with Hess negotiated. And so this year would have been the end of that 3-year contract and the need to negotiate a new one. In 2020, on the ballot in 2020, we had a 3-year contract agreed to with the HEA. That contract was voted down by the voters at the first drive-by meeting. We did not go back to renegotiate that contract in 2020 with the onset of the pandemic. So our teachers didn't have a contract that year. Last year, the board and the HEA negotiated a one-year contract that did pass town meeting. And the reason we did a one-year contract was just for the level of uncertainty that was out there, both in town and with the economy, with the pandemic. I think we felt, and the association felt, that with everything going on, that doing a one-year deal made a lot of sense for the community, sort of take a break, get the teachers a contract, but go back for a 3-year deal or for a longer term contract. So if we look at what we agreed to and what the town passed last year, for the teachers, there was no base increase. It was a pretty simple agreement. It was a step increase for employees who are on step. And then for those employees who were no longer on step because they had reached the top step, we provided for a $1,500, pretty much a new step for $1,500, so that all of our teaching staff at least moved up a step and received some financial compensation for the work that they had been putting in. So here we are. As Mike had said earlier, when the board hired Mr. Flynn and we're discussing our priorities for this upcoming budget year, the board's top priority and continues to be our top priority is reaching a deal with our 2 associations and then passing a fair, equitable contract for both of our 2 associations up this year. And for the board, the reason is because, the quality of our schools is dependent on the quality of our staff. That goes for our teaching staff, our support staff, as our administrative staff, even our superintendent, and then also our Teamsters contracts. So it's very important to us. And we also know, and we all understand the challenging years that our school district staff have been under. We understand what we want to do, and a priority for the district is retention. We want to keep our staff, and we want to be able to attract and retain staff. And we know one of the consequences of the pandemic are the teachers are leaving, not in Hopkinton, but across the country. Teachers are leaving, and we also know it's harder to recruit teachers into the profession. So we have a wonderful staff here that we want to keep and maintain into the future. So that was our thought going into these negotiations. And the other thing that I should have mentioned it earlier because it's very relevant. In our one-year negotiation last year with the teachers, we know something that's been brought up at this table and then across the district is, the increasing cost of healthcare and the desire to share some of those healthcare costs and the premium costs our teaching staff. And so in our one-year negotiated agreement, for any new hire this year, there was a 93-7 split, so 93% of the premium cost by the district and then 7% by the employee. And that was only for new hires. And so when we hired Mr. Flynn, that was the condition for Mr. Flynn, is that he would cover the 93.7 as a new employee for the district. So aligning these health costs across our 3 contracts, really, it was important to the board to figure out a way to tackle this so that all of our contracts are aligned or getting to alignment on the health insurance costs. Now I'm going to dive into that a little bit. So I'm going to start with the HES contract and then go to the HEA contract.
This is just to cut you off real quick. This is the pink tab in your notebook.
Oh, good. I was going to ask if you had given that.
Yep, pink tab.
Perfect.
So it's in the back.
So for everybody, what our HES employees, our support staff employees cover our office staff, our food service staff. We just had a nice long discussion about food service, but it covers the food service staff. And then our student support staff, which are instructional, student specific support, behavioral learning center support, speech language assistance, and then our library media assistants. So that's sort of the types of employees that covers. When we started negotiations with both of our associations, I think it was important for the board, and I think important for the community that we get off of this 2 contracts coming to town meeting or school district meeting every year. So what we didn't want to do is then have, again, 2 3-year agreements, because we'd be back at this table in 3 years, talking about 2 contracts again, which I think one is a lot. It's a lot to negotiate these. And then it's also a lot, I think, for the community to take in. And so if you're taking in 2 contracts every 3 years, that's a lot. And so the Hess contract was a 2-year agreement. And so it's shorter than what we normally bring in. But both sides felt that the 2 years was appropriate. And then we can get back onto a longer term schedule after those 2 years. And so we have agreed to, in year 1 of the Hess contract, a 3.5% base increase. And in year 2, a 3% base increase. And then on the health costs, we actually did something different with Hess. Then you hear what we negotiated with the HEA. So currently, the district covers or compensates, by the right way to say it, 90% of a single employee's health insurance cost. So for our teachers, it's 100%. That's what we're currently at. With Hess, we were covering 90% of an individual's premium. For a 2-person plan, the district would cover 70% of those premium costs. And then if we had a Hess employee on a family plan, we would only cover 70%, what would equate to 70% of a 2-person insurance plan. And so as the board discussed this, a couple of things rose up. One is that we were not treating the Hess employees equitably as we were treating our teaching staff. These are, in our view, these are essential workers and essential district employees are lowest paid, some of our lowest paid district employees. And so we were asking them to cover more of their health insurance costs, and we're asking anybody else at a lower pay scale than anybody else, which felt not fair, not the right thing to do, and not a great way to retain and draw new staff into your district if you're not treating them as equally as other employees. And so we have, in this contract, the board has decided that we would bring everybody up to the 90% premium share by the district and 10% for the employee, which we felt, again, was the right thing to do. And we know that health insurance is one of the leading reasons that employees are attracted to districts and stay in jobs, especially in these positions. And so for us, this is a recruitment and retraining piece. As I keep saying, it's also the right thing to do. And so when the cost of the contract, which I know is important to this committee, the year 1 total cost is $122,888. And then in year 2, it's $60,817.61. I think I'll stop there, and you guys are free to ask me any questions as long as they're not hard.
I'll try to ask two of these.
Perfect.
These employees, there is a step increase also.
Yes. Yep.
So it's 3.5% plus a step. What is a step normally? Is it like 5%, 2%?
I don't have the chart. Michelle, did you hear that question?
I did. Let me just pull up their spreadsheet.
Thank you.
Hold on 1 second.
Yep.
while Michelle's looking for that, I don't know if you could answer, Jim. Is the health insurance, are only full-time employees eligible for it or part-time,
Correct.
only full-time?
Yeah, you have to trying to get away from 0.6, but you have to get to 0.6 in order for benefits to kick in. Yes, it comes down to how often you work the hours. Qualify for insurance, yes.
And I was surprised the health buyout is only 1,500. I mean, on the town side, I think it's 4,000,
Is it?
4,500, and we find that to be an incentive to get people who can to go on to their spouse's policy or whatever. I'm wondering if you've looked into that, if that would be a cost saver.
So we had, I would say, many discussions around the buyout and buyout options. And we stayed with the $1,500.
It would be a huge cost because a lot of our membership in this area takes the buyout.
We
So it
evaluated
would
that
go from
data.
the, yeah,
Is that,
and it's about a 3% for a step. It actually varies depending on which track you're on, but it's about 3%.
that was the step?
The step increase, yes.
Okay. Is the buyout dollars consistent now across the different contracts?
You mean per HEA?
You know,
Yeah.
yes, it's
Yeah.
1,500.
I believe it,
And that's
$1,500, yeah, is the buyout price. I don't know about the Teamsters contract, but I believe between these two contracts, it's consistent.
Other questions for Jim? Comments on the HES?
And I just want to echo that. I know it sounds different when we say we're increasing, but it was one of the things we talked about my second meeting here about retention. And we were losing immediately. We had 3 people that started with us this year, and because of the openings, they went to the district that had better benefits. So this will make us competitive in that area of our support staff.
I guess that's what I wanted to ask is how we compare to some of the other districts around us, Bow and Concord and
So
whoever.
this is going to put us right on a level playing field. And now where our benefits will come in regards to demographic and things of that nature. Now, the students you're working with versus where maybe inner city, stuff like that, where they would say, well, I don't care who I'm working with because I'm getting now we take the lead in regards to our school system, our support, and now we're on with insurance and pay.
Just want to commend you and the board for this adjustment to health insurance. As you said, Jim, it will make us more competitive, and it's also the right thing to do for this group of vital employees, and it was inequitable. So thank you for doing that. Fully support.
And if I may ask, the $120,000 in year one versus 60,000, is that first number so much larger because we're giving more pay raises than normal? Or is it on the healthcare side?
Michelle, it's more on the healthcare, right? At 122?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Because the second year of the healthcare is just the GMR difference, which that's in a budget and not in the actual warrant.
And we don't, I mean, we don't know how many of the employees are gonna shift. And so when we budget for the health insurance costs, and Michelle, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we budget for a family plan because we want to budget for the highest amount or the worst case scenario. And so the number is high because we budget for family plan adoption. And then if someone comes in less than that, then the costs decrease. But in terms of budgeting and when we come in, that's how we present it to the community. All right, so I can move on to HEA. All right, this one's a little bit more complicated. I apologize, but there's more moving parts on this one. So our HEA agreement that we reached is for 3 years. So it's more in line with what we normally bring in. And so there was, I think probably the easiest way to say it, there's probably three moving parts in our negotiations with HEA that you'll see in this agreement. So there are the base increases to the contract. There is the discussion around the health insurance that we just had and continue to have that I'll get into. So there's a health cost and premium sharing. And then the third is the contract that failed. So the contract that failed in 2020 has ramifications for employees because they had no contract, there was no step increases. And then those who would normally get longevity, which is when you get to the top of your step, those employees also were penalized. And so the conversation around the table is how do we balance these three things? They're all goals, but there's costs associated. So how do we strike a deal to try to get as much of those things as we can? So I'll start with the health insurance costs. This was a priority for the board going in, as I've already just described. At the end of the 3-year deal, at the end of the 3-year contract, I shouldn't call it a deal. The end of the 3-year contract, we will get to the 93-7 split on premium share. So in the first year of the contract, it is a 2%, so it would be 98.2. In year 2, that goes to 4%, so it'll be a 96-4 split. And then in year 3 of the contract, it'll be 93-7. So what that means, I know we show costs, the cost of the contract, but these are savings to the district each year as employees are cost sharing their health insurance premiums. That's a benefit for the district. And so I think in year 1, those savings are anticipated to be about almost $37,000. In year 2, the health insurance savings are about $40,000, and then in year 3, it's $65,000. And then also just know that as we hire new employees to fill positions, those employees are automatically on the 93-7 cost share. So anyway, I say all that because.
Can I
please
jump in real quick?
Yeah,
So I just want to, on the savings down there, number 5, it's, as he said, it's 37,000 and thousand. Then the next year, it's an additional 40,000 on top of the 37. And then the third year, it's an additional 65 on top of the 77. So
thank you.
Yeah, just it's important to know that we were able to grow that way.
So then we, on the base increase, so that's a health insurance. On the base increase in year 1, there's a 2% increase. Year 2, it is 3%. And then in year 3, it's 3%. And then in year 1, we made up the step that some employees missed with the failed contract year. So employees who missed a step in, I get my years wrong, but in 2020, for lack of, in 2020, they'll make up that step in year 1 of the contract. And then in year 2 of the contract, this is where it gets a little complicated, so I'm anticipating questions. So in year 2 of the contract, those employees who missed out on like longevity benefits because again of the failed contract, we will make up those longevity increases in year 2. So by the end of year 2, the goal was that those employees are made whole as best as we could for the step increase that they lost, as well as the longevity. I guess the longevity payments that they missed out on. And so when you look at the final costs of the HEA collective bargaining agreement, in year 1, it is $393,082. Year 2, $364,498. In year 3, it's $350,189. And so you could see, in year 1, where the increase due to the base as well as making up the step. I think I got it all. Mr. Quinn, did I miss anything important?
And just to I know Jonathan keeps bringing it up on retention and retainment and honoring what our people, especially the people that have been here the longest. That was the thought process, and Jim kept saying, making them whole. So to recapture and get back to where you were in your career in the past helps us, again, competitively, because if someone's like, well, if they bail and they went to Concord would make that step up for them plus that. So this allows that to bring them back up to where they should have been. So it's one of those good faith. I was just happy to be a part of it. Again, it's one of the things that the board, I'd say, did the right thing for the people that have been here essentially the longest too in that contract. It helped them make sure that they want to continue and be a part of this great place. So I wanted to say that was a great thing by you guys.
And I remember the discussions back a couple of years ago that we thought our starting teacher salary was out of whack with what the competitive school districts were. Was there improvement significantly in that area of starting, the new teacher right out of college?
Can I ask Mike you that question?
Yeah, no, so the association did a great job of bringing all the averages in, and that data really helped on both sides of the table. Brand new out of school, I would say we're right where we should be. This is where you talk about wealthier districts or bigger districts where they can throw the money at the beginning to be more attractive, but then we make it up on the end. So it's those young graduates that are going to look like, do I want to be here? Am I going to be here for 3 years, or am I going to be here the long term? And if you're here the long term, then we are in great shape.
But you're in a better shape for the.
Oh, yeah.
So in a myopic approach,
Yes.
it's not a bad deal to come to
No.
in a couple of years.
And I do think, just following up on that point, it's sort of a win-win. It's the right thing to do from a moral perspective to support the teachers, but it's also, it's a good business decision because it's really expensive to have to replace somebody who leaves and get them trained up and all that. So, I mean, I think it's certainly very much in agreement.
It's not only very expensive, I just think in sort of the landscape that we're all operating in, it's also a lot harder. Because how I started off, right? The pandemic has caused changes across industries and education, probably, I think education and sort of healthcare are the two that probably have restaurants. We could probably go down a list, but there's a lot of education industry has taken a hit. And so, putting ourselves in a position to be able to retain the staff we have, which I think this contract does, so that we're not out competing with other districts in order to attract quality teachers. We already have them here, and so we want to make sure that they stay. So it is a smart business decision by all stretches of the imagination.
I'll just add to your list of careers that are really hurting for people right now is police. And we're certainly seeing that on the town level. So I appreciate, what you're trying to do. Again, the question on STEP, is it basically a 3% again?
So it does vary based on the track, meaning bachelor's, master's. If you go ahead and look on the district website at our current contract, we did not change the value. And you'll be able to see the increase in the scale is the same. It's just the starting point is not the same, but the step increases are the same.
And
Because it varies if you look at, I'm looking at it right now, it varies quite a bit.
And you refer to double longevity. What's the longevity bonus?
Oh, the
Bonus, or is it a salary increase?
So that's a payment. So once you reach out at 15, then longevity kicks in. So it's you're not moving up on steps. So it's a single issue payment, and that year those people lost that payment for that longevity. So that's essentially, we're making up, instead of making up a step because they didn't move anymore, we're making up that payment that they missed on longevity.
So in effect, it's a bonus. It's not a pay increase.
No, it's a pay increase because, so we have a top scale, right? So if you've been in the district long enough, you're at the top scale. So the step increases don't accrue anymore. So there's an additional payment on your salary. So it's not,
I guess you could frame it as a bonus. You could frame it as a bonus, but it's because of your length that you've been here.
It's in lieu of a step.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
It's part of the compensation package. So I think of bonuses as being over and above
That's what
your
I mean,
normal
yeah.
compensation, where this is part of the contractual compensation package for those teachers who have been here for that length of time. And it's not new within, I mean, it's been, I don't know how long it's been in our contract, but this isn't a new agreement. The longevity has been here for many years.
Mike, there was something that you said I wanted to just follow up on. You said a teacher who missed a step in 2020 here because of the failed contract could go, suppose they were offered a position in Concord and they would then make up that step. Is that a normal, I mean, just help us understand that better. That's a typical
let's use
scenario.
round numbers then. So someone who's here in Hopkinton for 10 years, right? That 1 year that it failed, they did not move to year 11 on their pay scale, but professionally they did. So if that person were to leave and go to Concord, Concord doesn't say, well, you missed a step. They say, oh, you're
in year 11.
So they'll start you at that 11 plus 1, whatever it is. So they're gaining that, they're going to gain that step if they leave.
Got it. Thank you. Don?
No,
Anything further on HEA?
All right, well, thank you very much. I think if you guys have questions on the contracts, after this meeting, Norm will be more than happy to answer your questions for you. But our hope, is that the budget committee would join the board in supporting these two contracts. It's showing really a unified voice going into to district meeting that, our teachers and our support staff are incredible assets to the district, and retaining them and helping them grow with our district is really it is our top priority for our students. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
we were promised comic relief.
I was just gonna say that.
So I can sing, I can dance.
But all right.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Just
Thank
did.
you.
Thank you, Jim.
You and I think alike.
That's
All right,
Good for
welcome
you,
back,
Liz.
Norm. Where are we going next?
So the next thing I wanted to discuss with you guys real quickly was a spreadsheet that I created for the budget committee, basically giving a snapshot of our budget and our future warrants and how we are using the fund balance and Article 10.
This is just after the green tab. and-
Yeah, this is the last page of that.
Yep.
Page 20.
So I probably hear me from, if I stand up a little easier for me to project.
Page 20 on that first set of slides, so it's page 20 in the materials, I think.
So when I
No,
did this
20.
up, I wanted to be able to share what our current balance is on fund balance was on December 31st, 2021, and then Article 10 balance on December 31st, 2021. Every meeting that I come to the budget committee, we are always reporting what the fund balance
Norm,
is.
can you hang on?
Yeah, sure.
We can't, a lot of people can't see that, and we're trying to find it.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Having
So your
difficulty,
pink
so-
tab should be stuck to it
Online.
and
Yeah,
go
I'm not
back
sure we all
to-
have,
I was
I'm not
only
sure we all
looking
have
at
that. I don't.
We can share.
Oh, I have the public packet. We're all the same. I just want to see.
Let's just make sure everybody's got access. I'm happy.
I apologize.
For you.
I'll start over.
I think it's,
I just want people to be able to listen to you.
yeah, of course. I think it's the 20th page in the materials. Yeah. We do this.
And it was in your budget.
I'm gonna change that for you though. It's on the pink tab in this one.
Thank you.
No one else took them right now, so
There we go.
go that way. Pink tab.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pink tab.
Two back for the pink check.
Two back. and the pink tab.
Good.
Yes.
That's what I have.
All right.
Sorry about
Can
that.
I ask everyone to kind of come to order just so we can listen to Norm, or we can pause? There's some questions for him. Thanks.
Me too.
Don, are you ready? Debbie?
Just trying to do.
All set, thanks.
Perfect. All right, so what I did was I created with Michelle's help, I added some color to it, a little bit of norm life, so I could walk you guys through this. Basically, it's a summary of the 2022-2023 estimated tax income. And as you can see, the two categories that I really wanted to talk about to start is the Article 10 funds, which is $679,000 is our balance that we currently have in there right now. Last time we added to that account was back in August 10, 2021, when the board moved money, and nothing has changed on that account. Article 10 is used to help reduce the tax rate during the budgeting process. So I want to just discuss the Article 10 funds to start, which is in red. The board has supported applying $400,000 out of Article 10 and applying that to the operating budget. By doing that, it reduces the balance in Article 10 funds to $279,000. So the only amount that's coming out of Article 10 for usage is on the operating budget, which reduces the operating budget to 38 cents.
Norm?
Yep.
Just for either members of the committee or members of the public who may be listening, who may not be familiar with the lingo of Article 10.
Oh,
Can you
of
just
course.
explain what that is to folks?
I'm going to turn, I can explain it in norm language, or I can have the business administrator, Michelle. Michelle, can you please explain Article 10 and fund balance at the same time, if you don't mind?
Sure. So a lot of districts do not have what we call Article 10, because what you had to do was go to a school district meeting and ask for authority to be kind of like a town, meaning that we can set aside funds and carry it over from year to year instead of just having our fund balance at the end of the year having to go to the tax rate. So back in, I think it was 2015, it was Article 10, that's why it's called Article 10. We established, it was 2.5% at that time. The state law allowed 2.5% of assessment, of net assessment. The good thing was last year during the budget process, the board supported, I think the budget committee did too, of changing that to 5% because the law changed to allow us to change it to 5%. So that went through in March. So that was a good thing because it allowed us to be able to get up to the 679,000. Had that not passed, we would not have been able to do that. So what happens is we have fund balance at an end of a school year that the board decides what to do with it. What I mean by that is they can do lots of things. Like in this scenario, you see at the bottom, there's 75,000 unallocated. The board can decide that 75, we're going to use this as an example. Do we want to knock something off the CIP and not have it go to fund balance and reduce the tax rate? Or do we want to add that to our Article 10 money so that we don't have 279,000, we have 75,000 more than that? So again, Article 10 is allowing us to solidify an amount, keep it year over year, whereas undesignated fund balance or surplus, in some cases, people like to call that, That has to go back to the taxpayers. I hope that helps.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yep.
Mark. Thank you for the question. So when we look at this report that I'm presenting, we are using $400,000 from Article 10 in order to support the budget impact on the operating account. And that's the only place where we could use it based in this example with a balance of 279. Based on the report that we've submitted to you guys last year, we used 250,000 to reduce taxes that tax said on October of 2021. And the balance that is reflected on this report is reflected at the current balance on this spreadsheet. I'm just making sure they match. They match. So the number that changes often, which is reported to the budget committee, is the fund balance. And thank you for Michelle explaining to that. At the current time, when this was created for the school board, we had $600,000 of an unreserved fund balance. Now there's still 6 more months of school. We still have a lot of things that can happen in the district. A lot of things Mike's gonna have that could come in, change. We don't know what's gonna happen. But Michelle felt comfortable as our business administrator saying to the board, saying, we can use money from this and apply it to the budget, apply it to warrants that we are going to be creating that we approved as a board, which would be to the maintenance trust, our special education trust, our benefits trust, which we'll unpack what that is. That's a new trust that we are doing for the school district, which helps with the fluctuation of insurance costs. And then the technology trust. So when we look at the current balance, we can see maintenance trust is at this amount right now. We can see the warrant is 200,000. We'd be using $100,000 from the fund balance, which would reduce the amount to be raised from the taxpayers to 13 cents. Instead, without that $100,000, we'd be asking for 26 cents. So we're taking the fund balance, applying it to the warrant, but only asking the town to raise $100,000. On the special education trust, this was a unique one that the board approved last night. And Michelle can clarify on that. Originally, we were going to appropriate $100,000 to the special education trust, but recently the state came back with $108,000 for special education that came back, and Michelle put that back into the unreserved fund balance, and then said instead of using money to raise appropriate from the taxpayers, we put that from the state right back into the trust, so there's a zero cost impact to the school district. Did I get that sort of right, Michelle?
Yep.
Good, all right. So when you slide over to the other column, which is the beginning trust fund balance, you can see what the new total will be if approved by the town. So if these aren't approved, these warrants, these balances would not be correct. As discussed, the benefit trust, Mike, could you please explain to them this new trust that we are implementing for the district?
Yep, one of the warrant articles we're going to be presenting is a benefit trust. So due to the pandemic, I guess, depending on how you look at it, there were less people going to the doctors, less procedures, all that. So we had a return essentially from our benefit of 200,000, I think it's 218,000, something along those lines. And we sought out legal advice on how to help us for multiple years. You know, one of the key things up there I put was benefits, and the fluctuation can go up and down. So developing this trust on the money that's coming back anyways and just putting it in there will allow us for multiple years not to have huge swings in cost.
Thank you. And to fund that, we're using the unreserved fund balance that we have been told on December 31st, this is what you have, this is what you can use, and taking that money, applying it to the warrant, which has no impact to the taxpayer, but we need their approval in order to fund the balance.
Is 200,000 the target balance that you want to maintain so that if someone was drawn down, you want to replenish that, or is that just a start?
That's our start. We've never experienced this. I would say most districts have never seen that type of return. So we wanted to make sure that we put it aside to help us protect us from the swings. I think that it's a great question mark on what would be the goal. The reason why the 200 was set is because that's what we're getting back. I mean, we could have went in at 50 or 60 or what. So we just wanted to be responsible for that return and putting it aside to help protect us for years to come.
Is the Article 10, is 5% the max or the?
Max.
That's the maximum amount. that can-
Yep.
So you can't like stick this 200 into the Article 10.
Article 10 is at the end of the year on June 30th, the board can do up to 5% to Article 10, correct, Michelle?
Yes,
That's the only,
So
that's the max.
I know where you're going. Article 10 is from what's left. So that 200,000 we're getting back is going to be what's left, but we're going to put it of what it was intended, but came back from insurance, so put it back to save and protect it for future insurance costs. I hate to cut you guys off.
One more thing to add too is that it's not just for health insurance, it's for retirement
Yeah.
increases as well. So that's why we did it as a benefit trust.
Mhm.
So like next year, we're gonna get,
It's a 2-year cycle.
lovely surprise of a increase in retirement. And maybe it's gonna be so rich that we're gonna wanna take some of this money to help our budget because of that increase, never mind on the health side.
it's about planning for the future. So we have some way of being.
I like it.
No, Michelle, my phone's gonna die because of the 2-hour conversation. So I just sent you a Zoom link. Can you click on
Okay.
in the email and then I'll bring you back.
Yeah, okay,
Thanks.
thanks.
You can use my phone if you want.
Oh, I got her set up. It'll actually probably be better for her.
We could use Jim's phone.
That means he'd have to stick around.
I think I could proceed until she gets on.
Yep, that's
Okay. So the next thing, last year, we created a technology trust. So we want to continue to invest into that as technology is changing, educating our students in other areas. We allocated $25,000 from the unreserved fund balance, which would give us a new balance, if approved from the town, of $50,000. So what's important, and then the vehicle trust, we are not putting anything in there for this year. So the total amount being used from the unreserved fund balance is $525,000. And when you take that amount and you deduct it from what Michelle gave us as a number, it leaves us with $75,000. We don't know where that's going to go at the end of the year. The board might do a one-time fixing something, or go toward Article 10 at the end of the year, which we can do. But our job was to be able to fill these warrants and focus on having a tax impact that is respectful to the taxpayer.
I'm laughing because your wife raises her hand all the time.
So I wanted, give me 1 second.
Yeah, no problem, sorry.
Yes. So I wanted to unpack this in one sheet, so everyone was able to see where the money was going from Article 10 and then from the unreserved fund balance. And I understand that at times people are confused on when it leaves. This leaves Article 10, when it goes Article 10, when it can be used from the unreserved fund balance. And I understand that. I do believe the audit does a good job of explaining, the unreserved fund balance at the end of the year. It's to match up to what's doing. For example, the unreserved fund balance could go up if not everyone takes the retirement that we offered last night. We offered 4 spots last night. for 4 teachers. In our budgeting process, we budget for 3. So we took, I think it's either 30 or 40 additional out of the unreserved fund balance and encumbered it. If one of those teachers say, I'm not taking early retirement, that fund balance of $75,000 goes up to $105,000. So it's important for the budget committee and for the community to understand that that number can increase based on the choices that happen between now and March 1st, when the teachers need to let us know. It has happened in the past with me on the board, that the board has opened up early retirement to try and get one other person to take it. But there's things that will happen that will increase the fund balance between now and June 30th.
Well, one more thing, sorry. Okay. And just to circle back to the sort of original presentation, we're trying to get away from this amount of money in the fund balance, right? What I ask for is what I'd like to spend. I don't want to ask for more than I intend to spend. In this fund balance of having $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 each year, we're trying to get back to it's a 0-line budget, meaning you won't see these huge numbers of what you asked for, Mike, where to go. We're trying to chip away at that so that it's again, like I said, if you give me 20, I'm going to spend 20. I'm not going to ask for 20 and only intend to spend 5. Trying to keep it a little bit simpler. So sorry, Thomas.
No problem. That's great. Okay, so hate to do it, but I have another question about food service.
So the $75,000, you mean?
Well, no, okay, so
Michelle, just because I switched her, can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree. Okay, so there's a fund balance of $600,000 currently. Right? That's
Current, yes.
That's
Yep.
current $600,000. So we can't spend money once it's in the operating budget. And so my assumption is that in the past, that's why it spent $600,000 on the food service line. Is that $600,000 on the food service line meant to match this fund balance?
No,
No.
no,
That's just where we sit currently
That's
right
just
now.
Got it. Okay,
good question.
so
Yeah.
slightly different question though.
Yep.
This $600,000 on the food service, that shows up in your total budget, correct? Somehow?
The $600,000 in food service is an expense, but it also shows up as $600,000 in revenue.
So it's a wash.
So
Essentially,
it's a wash.
yes.
It's a wash.
Where's the
Doesn't
revenue?
say.
Where's the revenue come from?
Revenue comes from parents, revenue comes from state, revenue comes from federal.
No, I mean, where's the revenue show up in? Well, because you don't get $600,000 of revenue, you get 300.
No, but again, when I talked about it earlier, I have to budget for food service that it is self-sufficient.
Totally, no, I get that.
And then in a
There's
way to get it, that the general fund subsidizes it, is you have it as an expense.
So there's the total operating budget of $22,553,000. Right? Does that include 600,000 from the food service?
Yes, I believe if I'm looking at the little sheet, hold on one second. I think it says that. I just realized that I should have had also the page we're going to talk about in a little bit blown up, you guys. The 22,553,797 includes the 600,000.
Great, okay, so in your presentation, you have a budget increase of
75,000.
75,000.
yeah, and you have 38 cents. So 38 cents in the tax bill. 21 is from the bond, 9 cents per thousand is on food service, right? So right now in this presentation, you are saying the budget is increasing because of food service, right? And that is true because you have $75,000 allocated in transfers to food service and other funds. But the thing is, that $600,000 you're never going to spend, and you're increasing the amount of money you can spend on food service by $75,000. So why don't you decrease that $600,000 line by $75,000? You're spending the same amount of money. You're always spending the same amount of money, but now your operating budget is no longer increasing by 9 cents per thousand.
Yeah, so we can do that, but it's still going to increase by the same amount because we're going to take $75,000 off of revenue. I know it's hard to, and I'm not doing a good job, and I'm sorry, but we have to budget food service. The expense has to match the revenue
But
in the food service program, not for the general fund. Because if you actually see on the other outlays area, that's where it shows the general fund is paying the food service fund 75,000.
That's line 5,200.
When the state looks at food service for our reports, the MS 27, the food service budget must match all the food service revenue lines.
But why is this food service budget $600,000? Why don't you just make it
I could go ahead and put it at 500, but heaven forbid, if we have increased costs, then what happens is we can't go over that 22,553,797. So let's point it out. Let's say I change it to 400,000. Food service actually spends 450. Federal project spends 800,000, not 750. Fund 8 spends 60,000, not 50. I have to take those overages and not spend it on the general fund side.
No, right.
Even though we're gonna have revenues from other sources, because the voters have given us authority for a bottom line budget.
But in the past, the expenditures on the food have been so much less than 600K.
Right, but as I talked about earlier, 2021 is skewed. We didn't have 2 employees for majority of the year. We didn't have all our kids every single day for 177 days. So if I had to guess, that probably should have been more like 410, 420. And so now you're talking about this year where, we're talking about 18 months from now that we're spending this money. So again, it's just a placeholder and it doesn't cost the town any money because the 600,000 is an offsetting revenue.
So I totally agree with everything you're saying, that it doesn't cost any money, but the budget is showing a 9 cents per thousand increase.
But it still will show 9 cents. Because if I take this down to 500 on the expense side, I'd have to take the 100,000 off the food service revenue that I have predicted.
The 9 cents is based on that 150, right? That you want to,
It's based on the 75,000.
the 75 and then the 75 the next year.
Yep, yep. 9 cents this year, 9 cents next
Right.
So I think we should set up a side meeting on food service or the next meeting, come back a little bit clearer on that. And Michelle knew walking into this was going to be different because every year it's been $1. It's been a placeholder and then we've always just paid the balance out of unintended fund balance, unused fund balance. Excuse me.
Yes, I personally am totally confused. And so I just, I'm looking at the 2 lines in the budget I think what you are too, the 1920 and the 2021. And the 2 lines are the 5,200, which is transfer to food service and other funds. And then there's this food service general line under other funds. And I would just ask maybe either whether it's through a memo or just a follow-up.
Yep.
I think we've got to demystify it. It's going to be one of the 3 things that makes up the operating budget for the, for the public. That's
Yeah.
the meeting, and we're completely confused. So we're going to have to make some progress there. I would just love to know what is the total, what's the total expense? And how are the revenue breakdowns, how do the revenue breakdowns come in? And it feels like there's some basic things that we should be able to grasp as a budget committee so we can support you.
Broken out would be helpful, because in the revenue, it breaks out food service sales and transfers into food service, which then don't quite add up. If you add then the child nutrition state and child nutrition federal. I think that's what Michelle's saying. We'd expect those expenses plus all of those revenue sources to even out, but it looks like they don't historically. But obviously I could miss something, like you said, it's
We'll unpack it.
confusing.
Yeah, that would be great because we
We'll
want to be
unpack it.
able to understand it, support it, and be allies for it if we're asked.
And just to be double clear, it's just a total coincidence that the fund balance is the exact same amount as the.
Total. Yeah, no, totally.
I
actually
want
to change it to
Great.
683
Cool.
just for fun, right?
Can I make another observation?
Well, we're trying to do this whole thing of get rid of the huge amount of money that moves through the fund balance.
Yep.
Is it a correct assumption that if we get that down to a much, much smaller number, we're gonna be moving a lot less money into Title 10?
Eventually,
Yes.
it's a good assumption, yes.
So the Title 10 looks beautiful now, but it's not gonna look that beautiful if we squeeze down the fund balance, because that's the origination.
But your tax rate.
It won't change.
Correct.
It won't change.
It should help that year to year.
But this goes through this whole mystery that you and I have been working about, trying to understand how all these pockets flow around.
Yep.
And I still want to get to a flow chart versus this one here as a supplement to it. But we'll work on that now.
We
Yeah,
will.
That's the problem. Article 10 is great as we chip away at fund balance. But as we get to it, I know it sounds make-believe, but if we were to ask for 22,553,797, I would want to spend 22,553,797, where that hasn't been past practice. We'd be asking for 22,553,797 with the intention to only spend, let's say, 21 million. Right, and then all that was to help bring tax rate to all these different moving pieces. Now it's just, it'll be a straight, what we ask for is what we spend, and that's what the rate is. So then the next year, what we ask, what we spend, that's what the rate is. It's not trying to bring it down. It becomes more manageable.
But locking all this stuff into a budget line gives you zero wiggle room if crazy things happen.
Yes and
We've
no.
always been saying, you got too many pots that you got money in, but it's been comfortable because you could move some money around when you had to. But I think there's a compromise there, and I think you get into it.
Yeah, and the compromise, you'll see, let's just say we relied on the unintended fund balance, right? It's a cushion, and it's not a safe way of practice. Meaning, putting the money in the food service, even though we might not spend it all that's the safe practice. Where if we don't spend it all, then that becomes fun. The other one would be energy, right? We might project a little bit higher because the fund balance isn't there to protect us, but at least you know what we're projecting higher, not just continuing to lean on fund balance.
The end result of all this, it does not affect the tax rate.
No, it should help stabilize what we're doing year to year. So it doesn't, what were you guys at last year? I'm sorry, wasn't it 160 something?
Yeah, it was high.
60 something. And then this year it's down to 119. And then it should become a consistent 11 cents, 12 cents, whatever it may be, once you get to those numbers.
And that's what Mike's advocated from this whole budget process, is to budget for what he needs and to see this fund balance. And it's going to take a couple of years for that to happen. This is not his budget that we're finishing. He's created his own budget. So we'll be able to see it within his next two and evaluate that.
This has been a huge mind change for me, because I've never operated with a fund balance. I've only ever operated with a bottom line. And then what's left over at the end of the year is excess money that would either then you make a decision, Article 10, put it back, or do you spend it like some you did last year? You bought a couple of things, the upgraded software, stuff like that in the district. That number should become smaller and make more sense, that we're not continuing to dance around. Well, we relied on the fund balance for that, or we relied on the fund balance for that, or we should only be relying on what we're budgeting for. Did I use the planning for vacation scenario with this group? That's how I try and talk to taxpayers the most. It's like, I'm planning for Disney 2 years from now, or a year from now, and I need to plan for hotel, food, all that. So let's say I need $3,000, but I'm actually going to ask for $5,000 in case I need to spend more. It should be the opposite, right? I should be zeroing in on what it is, and if cost comes down, then I get savings. We shouldn't be asking for more than we want to spend.
May I ask, the fund balance system is all I'm familiar with since I've been on the board. Is this something unique to Hopkinton? Have we always had this system, and where did it originate?
So I would say it's in the minority in the state on districts operating with a fund balance. And the intention, we actually just went through, Rob and I went to a conference on it, and there was only 2 people in the room. And we just went to see, like, how do we get away from it? And there were people in there trying to, what the benefit is it can bring your tax rate down each year, right? But because of where it was intended initially, the world's just changed to where if you budget appropriately now, then you're gonna have a balance anyways to bring stuff in. Yeah, I'd say we are in the minority with that practice.
But bring your tax rate down each year, but because you had an elevated tax rate.
That's,
Per year.
I didn't, that's the better way to say.
Okay, other questions?
Dawn had one.
I go ahead.
What, oh, me?
If you
You're
want
up
to.
and then back to Don.
Okay, cool. So Don brought up an interesting point where as the fund balance, like the money going into Article 10 has tended to come from the fund balance, and I'm gonna get rid of that. And this year, without using Article 10, you're looking at like a 2.6% increase in the budget, right? So that is well under inflation. That is like a normalized increase in budget. That's great. My question is, is there a concern that you're using a lot of the existing Article 10? You're using,
So we went around on that. We talked about 200, 300, 400.
yeah,
And we'll circle back to the real point was the contracts for the most important part. And it'll be the last time you see two on at one time. So the school board had decided to use the 400,000 to bring ours down to make sure that those contracts became a priority.
I totally see that, and I'm all for that. I think my concern is that even like the contracts themselves are still only at 3-something% increase in year one, right? So all of the budget increases are still well under. It just seems like it seems like the budget is coming in under inflation. That seems like the wrong time to use it. It seems like if the budget is coming in, if there's large additional costs, that's the time to use fund balance. And if we're not going to be seeing significant increases to Article 10 because we're reducing the fund balance, it just seems like it might be a good time to save Article 10.
I don't
spend it.
It's a good question, but I also, this is just me talking, we're coming out of a global pandemic. And I think we have to be really cautious of where people are in their lives right now. We don't know what's going to happen in, the next couple of months, in a year or so. So we have to be respectful to people. How do I say this? We don't know what's going to happen in the next month and 2 years. So I think being fiscally responsible, I think, is very important to this town.
I also think that 600,000 that matched up is as of 12/31. And we could anticipate that. I mean, Norm gave a simple low-lying example of if that teacher doesn't take it, then that gets another 40. I think there'll be, Michelle kills me when I say this stuff, but I think there'll be enough money to replenish a good portion of what we're doing so that it protects us for the next couple of years as well.
Mr.
If I can just add, of the 600,000, 300,000 of it is just because of the extra revenue that we got. Like that was talked about earlier, 100,000 from the state for special education aid, 200,000 from Health Trust. So I'm a very conservative person, and because we're so early, that will be, unless something really awful happens, we will be a lot more than 75,000 after taking all that funds.
That's why I said she kills me when I say it, because she can't.
Let her say it.
But I would not be surprised to see that number wash out the 400,000.
If I could just add, the two things I think about here. One is, when we say we're getting rid of fund balance, what we're talking about is managing to that revenue. So what our administration has been doing is having to manage our entire budget to get to that fund balance. And so we want to get away from the management for revenue. And then I wouldn't assume that by doing so, we're not going to have a fund balance at the end of the year to replenish things like that. Because this is a $22 million budget. We have staff coming in, going out, and as Norm talked about retirements, and we'll see savings even with as we budget our health insurance costs for the contract. Those are all family plans, not all 100 whatever our employees are gonna be on banking plan. So I think what we're trying to do is get away from managing to revenue, instead manage to expenses. And then I think we'll continue to have fund balance that can replenish our article plan, but it won't be how Mike is leading his team managing our budget. Which is how the town does. I mean, I think the town's been away from fund balance as well, because it's really hard to manage towards revenue. It's much easier to manage your expenses.
Yeah, and I guess we should change the way we say it, because to put it in perspective, in Hampstead, I was managing I think we were 29 million. And we would have, each year it was roughly anywhere between, one year was 200,000, the other year was, 380, 400. So there's always money, yes, unspent, but it's not I like that, not managing to make sure there's a fund balance, right? Okay.
I'm sorry, Norman.
No,
But what we find, at least what I've observed, say over the years, is that we're making educational decisions. So decisions that we want to spend money on for the betterment of our kids, but we're doing it in a very restrictive way because we have to make sure at the end of the year, we have that fund balance revenue so that our tax rate lines up to what we talked about at the town meeting. And so as the school board member, that's concerning because I would rather be able to spend surplus dollars that we see helping our children and having a better district rather than pretty much managing our revenue to get to a tax rate, which is sort of what we've been doing. It's been in that trap because it's a revenue line in our budget, impacts our tax rate. If we don't need it, then we'll go to the next town meeting, haven't reached our agreement on what a tax rate impact would be. So to me, this is a better education program as well. We'll put that money to help our schools rather than money to help our tax rate.
Seems in the past, Michelle has spent a lot of time managing that all the way
Poor
through the
Michelle.
year, freezing the cost and purchasing things just to meet that huge target.
I've said to her, I have no idea how she operated.
Right.
No idea, because the level of management she had to do and the people she had to aggravate, irritate, break their hearts, all of it. Michelle was the bad guy.
Yeah.
And it's just not a way we should be operating. I mean, I compliment her literally every day. So.
Mark, I have one other question. It just, from the very beginning, you came up with the number, the increase in the budget number was $580,000, which equated to 38 cents. My understanding of for every 100,000 you've got to raise from taxes, it's about 13 cents on the tax rate. Where am I wrong on that assumption?
You hear that question, Michelle? He said about every
No.
100, he said about every 100,000 equals 13 cents. So how does the 580 equal 38 cents?
Oh, because of the revenue increase.
That's what I thought it would be. Yeah. We haven't got down through the revenue part. That's
Right.
just the expense.
Yep.
Ken.
Yeah, Norm, I appreciate the slide you put together. And one difference from the way the town does it is we have fund balance at the end and it impacts the bottom line, not specific items. And what I think might be misleading to some people is your operating budget is not increasing by 38 cents because you're netting out, say, fund balance there.
So you mean talk about the operating budget tax impact and what it would be, and then the savings using the fund balance and then having
There's
the,
a credit,
oh yeah, that's a great idea.
but that also results in a higher percentage operating budget increase. But I think it's more.
Yeah, no, that's correct. So basically what we're using based on each warrant, and I believe Rob Nato in the finance committee, we did that last year when we did a snapshot. We basically unpacked it by showing the increase, and then when we were using fund balance or Article 10, we had that difference, and then it narrowed down to like a net income kind of thing, what the total thing was raised. I'm happy to
I'm not.
No. I am no, I appreciate the feedback. It's the first time I tried to put something together that I thought I could help explain the moving pieces in our budget. But I think it's important to improving my skills is definitely important.
And did I hear right from, I think, Michelle, that Article 10 funds can only be used to, for operating budget offsets?
Article 10 can be used for emergency expenditures due to a recent change in the legislator, as well as it can be used to it was originally set up to stabilize tax rates.
So bottom line,
Yes, but also now you can also use it for emergency.
okay, so my comment about fund balance is also applicable to Article 10.
Yes.
I have a quick question. Going from the fund balance system to the zero balance system, what happens when we go into town, school district meeting, and the town votes to cut your budget by $100,000? Because the school board can no longer fall back on the fund balance. How do you handle that compared to how we used to do it?
Bringing up the worst case scenario, right?
It's something that could easily happen.
Yeah, so that's another consideration as we move away from it and towards it. So it's going to be new for me because the district meeting itself is new for me, where we were ballots and we had a default budget. So if it was voted down, then the default budget kicks in. So I have to work with Michelle on that. I mean, I don't have the right answer for you right now.
I guess I'm not quite following that, because if the town voted to reduce the budget, the town voted to amend the budget down by $100,000. That just says you have to spend $100,000 less. And that seems, if the fund balance is there, they still can't spend it if the town has reduced the budget. So I'm not sure
Well, they could
what
always.
the difference is in terms
Well,
of
if
the fund
you
balance issue.
recall, like when the football team was cut by the town, but then the school board found the funds to fund the football team. So they were able to move funds around, but if the figure was too high to move things around, then this new system kind of locks you into firing somebody, right?
It's my understanding if there's a reduction in our budget at the meeting, that it is not tied to any specific category in the budget. It's whatever the superintendent decides to do. So if he wants to still fund football and do something else, then that's his priority.
But this is also why you're trying to get away from phraseology like FTEs.
Yeah.
I mean, this is precisely the point we're trying to bring up at the beginning of this meeting.
Yep.
To avoid the town framing the issues that way,
Correct.
so that there aren't like line item votes at town meeting.
Yep.
No, I think where it comes into play sometimes, though, is if people are uncomfortable with the budget, whether it's members of the budget committee or members of the community,
Yeah, of course.
and they will ask the question, if you had to reduce your budget as proposed by X dollars, what are the implications of that? And, and a general, we'll figure it out might not be satisfying to folks. So they want some sense of where it might come from, which is where it might come from is more real than it's going to be this position or it's going to be the football program. That's,
That was our worst scenario for this group to hear, to try to get into their budget, trying to cut out line items. That was the worst thing we could possibly think of.
Absolutely.
We're not educators.
Right.
yeah.
So
Go to number one pencils.
quick summer, just to wrap this up. So based on everything here, based on total warrants, including the teachers' contracts, as you can see in the top right there, Hess, we cannot use fund balance or Article 10 towards that. When we put everything together and we unpack it for the tax rate increase, everything all in is 117. I think we were like a penny off, Michelle, weren't we?
It's a rounding thing.
Yeah. Was I higher or were you lower?
I think somewhere it says, my documents say 116, 17, but I think yours could say 116.
Okay. We can fight about the penny, but no, so everything all in was 117.
What percentage is that? No?
What percentage altogether? Michelle, what percentage is that altogether?
I think it's a 5.2% increase for the tax rate.
Confirm that my oldest can pick up my kid in basketball. Excuse me.
Michelle, is there anything you want to highlight in the packet so that they can digest it?
Yeah, so just a couple things, because I know we've been going at this a long time, and I know we still have a lot of information. One item in the packet that was given to you guys is a programmatic budget document that you guys had us created. It's probably been a couple of years now that we've done that. So I just want to make sure that you see that and that is, so that is in there. On top of that, there is the budget bulletin, which has obviously a lot of information that I can go over a few of the summary pages and then, come back next week for questions. However you guys want to handle it, because it is the rather large document like we've had in the past.
Looking to you, Mark, for
I have I have a question about the programmatic budget. I think one of the things that the committee was interested in when that was first developed was how our investments in each of these program areas might be changing over time and where there are trends. And so even if it wasn't broken out by the building and the district as it is now, but even seeing the totals for the previous couple of years, however long we have this information available for the last couple of years, it might be helpful for folks who have been wanting to understand the trends and what's really going up in terms of our programmatic investments. It helps to shed light on the district's priorities over time.
Michelle, did you hear that?
I didn't.
No, that's okay. I will try and relay Mr. Zankel's comment, basically see if there's a trend of us being able to look at past programs and seeing the increase and decrease. Mark, is that kind of like?
Your final column has a total figure.
So
So
you're
Michelle,
saying,
you're fine.
this directly comes out of our system
Right.
into Excel. So you're saying to maneuver it to add columns with prior year column totals, like last year's totals?
Could you add the 21, 22 and 2021 totals after that final column for each of those program areas?
If we, I know we have 21, 22. If we have 2021, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's the request. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then I was thinking about that while you were talking about the second part, Norm or Mike, so I wasn't paying attention.
I was just,
about the programmatic, but
I was looking to you on how you wanted to proceed. Do you want her to go over it? Do you want the committee to digest it over the week and come back?
Whatever questions this committee wants, any information.
yeah, I think if folks have requests for additional information or clarification, now is a good time to ask. I was envisioning that next week, Norm, we would go through it article by article.
Sure.
At least those that the budget committee is asked to weigh in on, which is not all of your articles, but it's a number of them. And then we can, the committee can, if we're ready to vote on, and on how we feel coming to the public hearing, we can do that. If there's further discussion, clarification, we can, but we could go through it article by article next week. Deb, did you have that?
No. that
Oh.
sounds good.
Is there any report, anything you guys need in order to understand this budget that you would like from the Hopkinton School District for us to work on in order? Anything? I've always heard this school board doesn't offer this up a lot, but I'm here to support the budget committee.
I think you've got a specific request around food service.
Yeah.
And that, all
It's
right,
going to be a dissertation, actually.
it's, hopefully in one page dissertation.
On trimming the fat services.
All right. Revise.
So I have a list of food service unpacked.
You have a suggestion from Ken around how you,
Do the chart with the tax rate impact difference, kind of doing that. I am going to try and attempt with support to help with your question of your flow chart. I'm going to need help with that. And we can try and work on that. Michelle?
I'm here.
John, we may, in order to get your answer, your request done, I'm happy to do it. I just need maybe a little bit of guidance so we bring it to the budget committee correctly, okay? So I would ask the budget committee to support, you working, through Mike or me, Michelle, and collaborate that information so it's clear. So when we bring it back here, we have it to your liking, if that's okay with you. Perfect.
I did want to ask something that I sort of started out thinking about, which is based on the projection of the increase in class size, particularly in the Harold Martin, are you anticipating a change in the class size
So that was one of the.
based on this budget?
Yep, so no, the simple answer is no. The board has supported and stuck with all the people that are in place this year are all coming back next year with the same class sizes. So they're supporting this 4 teachers throughout the school, which is great for us.
And can absorb that increase of 16 or whatever you're projecting.
Yes, because we did not have a 4th kindergarten teacher this year
Okay.
because of the lower enrollment, the unanticipated lower enrollment.
I know that 60 days is 3 lifetimes from now, but are we planning an in-person school district meeting at this point?
But we just talked about it this, is today Wednesday? We talked about it just this morning. I am reaching out to Mr. Newsom, myself, to start that planning. And he'll be at our next board. Well, I don't know if he will. I'm going to invite him to our next board meeting to begin that process.
Thank you. You don't know now.
Well, there's no emergency order.
Yeah,
We're required to have it in
We have to
person.
meet in person, and no executive order or anything right
That's
now.
all dropped. So it's more about the planning of how do we accommodate.
I would keep it safe.
Thank you.
I think we'll have to have a similar conversation, not that we ever get huge numbers, but for the budget committee's public hearing. And I can reach out to Neil.
That's at the school, correct? At the auditorium?
Typically in the auditorium, and there's usually plenty of space. Nonetheless, we're in a situation where I don't know if a hybrid option is possible in the auditorium, for example, or if there would be a place where we could.
Just do it outside.
I got a cornfield.
I certainly think here would probably be too crowded in terms of if a lot of public comes.
Yeah, so
The auditorium probably makes sense. But we had a joint meeting, school board, select board at the auditorium, and that was on Zoom also, or whatever.
yeah, if we can, if we're able to broadcast from there so that members of the public, so anyway, that will be a to-do for me to explore that with Neil.
So just to clarify, food service unpack request is in bold. Fund balance Article 10, distribution with Mr. Houston, review of chart with tax impact differences, kind of a different format for Mr. Trom. And then Mark's request that he shared with Michelle. Is there any other information from this board that you would like in order to make a decision on our budget or any warrants?
Can I say one more thing to wrap up?
You certainly may.
I just wanted to thank everyone here for bearing with me as I lived through this the first time. Speaking about different experiences, I've never had to present to the town budget committee before. Ours was when I presented it to the school board yea or nayed it, and then it moved forward. So this is a new experience for me, and I appreciate you having a greater understanding of what my vision and goals are. And I continue to reiterate to everyone I work with, it's a multiple year process. Everyone has to learn new verbiage, new goals, new targets, and you guys have done a great job of asking great questions. When we talked about what the district could use, whether it's facilities, curriculum, or all those needs. You guys have really been all in, and it's interesting to have not the school board asking those questions. And it actually, it's a great process that I've enjoyed, because you get to talk to non-educators or non-people that did not run for the school board to have just an idea of what we're doing and what the goals are. So I just wanted to thank you.
And I want to thank Mike, Michelle, and Jim for coming in today to present our budget with you guys and the teacher's contract. This is your number that's going on the towns. And so you're the number that's going up, and we're here to provide all the information. Mark is correct. Where's the money going? Anything we can do to help, we're here to help. Michelle, can you stay on for financials? Because I don't have it up, and you probably have for December in case they have questions. Do you mind staying on for that?
I don't mind, I haven't done December's yet, because I'm gonna do it at the next board meeting, but we have November's. right?
Yeah, they got November's. That was in December. So
Yeah.
that'd be awesome, because my mind is,
I have to take my computer. Financials right now.
yeah, financials will be right after this, after public comment, I believe.
Right.
So,
Anything further from members of the committee at this time? Okay, thank you, Norm. Thank you, Mike. So we're gonna open up a public comment session. And we'll start with those in the room. If you have public comment, please, what we'd ask you to do is state your name and your address and speak up so that members of the committee and members of the listening can hear you.
Good evening, Lauren Clement, 86 Maple Street. I initially came in to discuss the food service change on the budget. I've seen that's going on for further discussion. I guess my question to add to that, when they did the all-in budget that was presented here in October, it was 150,000. It's actually 149.99. Probably that $1 was holding that. What are the advantages and disadvantages of staggering this 2 years, putting in 75 and 75? We're still funding the 150, and I'm assuming those numbers were based on Michelle's 3-year average. And this one little column seems to be the smoke and mirror number. It's obviously you guys are bound by it too, so it doesn't surprise me that 6 months into trying to follow all this that I'm lost. But I just, other than that 9 turning to an 18 on there, what are the pros and cons of not staggering it 2 years? Does that affect our tax impact? Does it not? It does change the numbers there that everybody was trying to scale down. So that's question one.
So let's pause on that one and respond to that one.
take a stab at it. The board supported breaking up this food services into 2 different budget cycles. It's my understanding that we supported $75,000 this year, and then we're going to make it up potentially in the next budget. If it ends up being 150.
It goes back to the contracts being priority.
Yep.
So next year, when there's not 2 contracts on the ballot, that allows for you said 9 or 18 cents. What's the difference? It's to save, knowing that the impact of the contracts is going to raise that number. So then the 2 contracts that were the dollar, whatever it was, it helped us lower that tax impact.
But that still comes out of fund balance, correct? So when you're still funding it, and my assumption was that it was 100, because she came up with 150 on the all-in, it's still getting funded there. So there's 75 at the end of fund balance, you can at the end of the year, have to take that 75 out and move it over. I guess I'm still not following that. Maybe it's gonna get unpacked at the next round. So that was.
But it's important to understand.
Yeah, I'm still.
Well, let me finish, please. It's important to understand that we decided to do $75,000 this year, which before it was funded by just $1 in our operating budget. When they did the budget, 150,000 was supposed to be allocated for that. Instead of doing $75,000 this year, which has an impact of 9 cents. So we had teachers' contracts we want to support, test contracts, and funding this at this amount. And at the tail end of our next budget, to make it up to what Mike's trying to accomplish of budgeting for what he wants to use for budget units. We're doing it in 2 potentially budget cycles. I don't just.
I understand the gist of that. I just think the cost of it is 150,000. That's why it was presented as 150, and I don't understand how that's still.
So we will
Only
unpack
half
it.
funding it. You still gotta come, I think Don said it's still gonna come out of somewhere. So I guess it's on the radar and it's gonna get unpacked a little further. Maybe I'll watch it again and I'll understand. Another quick comment, and I don't even understand how all these teacher contracts go, but I don't know if it's ever been explored with setting up HSA accounts with higher deductibles for teacher health contracts, and whether the district would contribute half of that and they can pay a higher deductible. It's just a comment. And then my last comment is, if you guys do meeting at the auditorium of the high school, I myself, sitting in the audience, have not been able to read the PowerPoint presentation that was the joint meeting. I couldn't see any of it, so it wasn't very helpful as someone trying to take notes and understand all these budget lines. So that's just my comment, and that's all I have to say.
Great, thank you very much for showing up, for sticking it out this long, and for sharing your questions and comments. We've got a few members of the public on Zooming in, and so if any of you who are dialing in remotely have comments, can you please use the raise hand function? And Thomas is monitoring that.
Yes.
They're everywhere.
Okay, so
I have a question for you.
Thomas, no hand raising.
Why don't you just fly you up?
Okay, great. We're going to close the public comment session then. And we're going to move on to the school district's financials update.
Sure, I'm gonna, since my mind is kind of in this budget, I'm gonna ask Joe real quickly to go over any questions you have for our November financials. I sent it to you guys in your packet. Michelle, if you want to share any information, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. So in your packet that you should have received was the November financial, which it shows just under 502,000 for an end of year fund balance. I've also put aside there at that time, we were committing 325,000. Obviously that's changed since this is done, and the December financial will reflect the recent document, like what Norm had showed about what we're actually committing. So as you can see on here, food service is showing as a negative fund balance, meaning that we'd have to cover the surplus of the deficit of just under 230,000. But again, that is continually shrinking. As you can see from the prior month, it went down 20. It's going to shrink even more because of the recent funds that we've been getting, as I talked about earlier, are more than what we normally were getting.
Any questions? Michelle, thank you so much for doing that for me.
Oh yeah, no problem at all.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle.
Here's your, so I only have 2 more things.
This is how Michelle and I work.
I know, I know.
We get it.
So the last 2 things real quickly that I wanted to unpack for you real quick is we are closing in on our strategic planning survey, which is estimated to go out this week. I've met with quite a few of you regarding that for feedback, and I appreciated your comments that has been submitted to the committee. Once that survey is complete, I will send it to the budget committee so you guys have an opportunity to submit your feedbacks and comments so the strategic planning committee can review it and move forward. I'd like to extend a great thank you to John again for joining us through the steering committee. Last thing, I just quick update with the building project. We sent out an RFP for a sustainable energy, different type of energy resource over at Harold Martin. Right now, we have sent that out. It's going to be posted this week in order to get a quote for that. As discussed in our previous meeting, the board has sent that out with money anticipated from the bond project to fund using that. We have not received information back on the additional flooring from the original 370 left on the bond. But once we get that additional information, we will then deliberate and discuss what rooms need to be done with anticipation of the balance of the project going into maintenance trust. So essentially, the building project is done. We're just trying to get more information on the boiler or another type of reusable energy that we're really different type of fuel opportunity for us. So with that, any questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Quick question on the fuel, the boiler and all of that. Will any of that information, once that discussion is done, be presented back to the community for input on how they feel about, you know, how the decision may go or?
So on the specific RFP, like, do you mean, are you talking about strategic planning or are you talking, or the RFP for the boiler?
Yes. So, you know, when the committee makes a decision as to what they're looking at.
Oh, strategic planning.
Yes.
Yes. So there's gonna be a survey that goes out, and then Rick Barnes, who is running our steering committee, he'll give that information, and then I'm gonna let Mike handle how we handle the next steps on it once we get feedback from the survey.
I'm very sorry, I missed
Oh,
the
that's okay.
second part.
I was just wondering about input from the community. Once we've narrowed down, the committee narrows down how they would like to proceed with the boiler or what type, how they're going to utilize the different fuel.
I think you're mixing them.
Oh,
those
So
two.
the boilers are not part of strategic planning. Okay, so what happened is, we put a RFP out for a boiler, and then the board last 2 meetings ago requested that we send out a new RFP for alternative fuels. So once those bids, if anyone bids on it, that comes into my office, and then we evaluate it and present it to our school board for their input on which way to proceed. So it's the school board that's the one that.
Yeah, to that part.
So presumably, if the public want to weigh in on that, they would come to the school board meeting and then publicly comment on that.
And that will be on the agenda. So when that comes up,
Is that specifically for a pellet boiler or a wood chip?
alternative fuel,
So multiple choices of woods.
whoever's out there, yeah.
Okay.
You know somebody? Just checking.
But it would have to be wood pellets, right?
Who knows?
Cow chips.
Right.
Couch, you know,
I can do that.
that is all I have.
That's it.
Yes.
Thank you, Norm.
Well, thank you guys
Thank
for
you,
your
Mike.
patience, and your good questions and the collaboration.
Norm, while you come around, could you grab that microphone and we'll pull it back over here? Thank you. Great, okay. We are going to move on to Don. Are you prepared to present the Katuka precinct budget tonight? Okay, I couldn't remember if you had confirmed that.
I did.
Great, thank you. I believe you. I just-
You all have your handout of that. Norm, you gonna sit? You got it.
Thank you.
The budget is basically a repeat of what we did last year. And, but basically no major changes. We have a new person in there. They're trying to do a lot of work up on the controls. The last major lightning storm that we had here, maybe 2 months ago, fried almost every part of the control system at the major plant. So he's been struggling this last month to get, suppliers to get that squared away and to get that under control, but that's been a major problem. Fortunately, probably shouldn't even say it. We haven't had any major breaks yet in the water lines themselves. Coming down to the very bottom down at the second page of your handout, we're basically looking at a decrease of 3 cents on the tax rate. Do you have any questions of what we're doing or how we're doing it? I'll take them.
Don, the capital outlays are going down significantly. Does that mean you're caught up on major projects or have the reserves?
The only one that we really did anything with is with the main, the second tank, which is on Main Street by Linda Kimball's property. We finally finished that project off, and that costs some money that you see in here. But other than that, we haven't gone into that fund to do anything of late. So we've got about $1,200,000-300,000 in the capital reserve fund at this point. And we're just trying to keep building that up because we know something's going to happen. We do the redo of Cedar Street. When the town does their redo of the highway, that'll be a significant item, probably the biggest we would have, other than redoing the whole major tank, which is millions. So again, I think your answer is we haven't had any new projects that we've got listed.
Okay, thanks.
That's over and above the normal maintenance.
Sure.
Hopefully none will pop up either.
You said there was a lightning strike on the plant,
Correct.
but that didn't affect operations?
Well, it did, but he did a lot of it manually. I was up there, many hours doing the manual.
I didn't need to print it out.
Flying over worries.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know what
Do
happened.
you want to go first? The food service.
You all set for Don?
Yeah.
Thank you, Don.
Again, I guess I would like to have the caveat, we had to cancel last Monday's meeting to finalize the approval of this by the commissioners. But the chairman says this is basically a go. I just, next meeting, if there's a change after we have our fill-in meeting sometime in the next week or two, if there's a minor tweak, I can bring that here, but I guess I'd ask you not to do anything with this other than.
Don't vote on it yet.
99.99.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. All right, Thomas. It's your moment in the sun.
Big budget changes this year. We have some food service upgrades.
That's what
You're going in partnership with Cracker Barrel.
Do you know if they're all on here or?
it's 4 pages, right?
They were all on the Google Drive as far as I know, but
It's here. Somewhere. I'm looking at it.
Maybe it's towards the bottom.
it's going.
HVP.
You see it? Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you. Great. That's a long one, guys. So big changes this year. We had an increase of $100 in insurance and $500 increase of accounting software upgrades. And then a random decrease in financial administration, which I'm not really sure why, and then $1,000 less in street lighting this year, which was probably because we had a bunch of street lights out. So we fixed that.
One way to save money.
I have a question.
Yes.
So is the decrease financial administration a salary position?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a salary position. It's our only real.
So there's only one employee. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Our budget next year is up $600 from 2021. Major driver is insurance, and then we're also paying the person who winds the clock a little bit more. So the total taxes we raise are $18,063. But everything else is staying the same, other than a couple $100 for insurance, and that's about it. And then really, I mean, the majority of the precinct is really the water project. So I figured I'd talk really quick about the water project. The water department is completely self-funded, so nothing about them comes from taxes, other than we guarantee the bonds. We're still doing the well upgrade project. Hopefully it'll be done in the middle of next year. It's supposed to be done this December. They've had delays just because of normal construction scheduling delays. And we did get an asset management grant, and we decided to not do state loans for that. But it's plugging along.
Questions?
Keep it interesting.
We gotta think of one.
I did ask about the administrative, I'm trying to think.
That's all I got.
All right, very good. Well, we have, we can ask members of the public if they have any questions. So we're gonna have another quick public comment period, just on what we just heard, so you're good. Anybody who is remote, if you have a question for Thomas or Don or Norm, or on the town budget for that matter, raise your hand.
Nobody.
Food service?
Sam's
Anybody?
good.
Ellen, what? Yeah, Sam, like, he's still here.
Okay, we'll close the public comment session then, and our last item is any other business to come before the board. And I want to just talk about our process going forward, so,
That's what I want to think.
yeah. Just as a reminder, and I have to remind myself, so our public hearing is scheduled for February 9th. Before then, this committee needs to decide whether we are going to endorse the proposed operating budgets and the other warrant articles that are in our purview. And so we've given some feedback to the school, and they're going to come back to us next week. I'm trying to remember if there are things that if there's feedback you've gotten that you think might fundamentally change anything, or if you feel like the budget as you have now, it will be ready for this committee to deliberate on and
I
determine.
I don't recall that I had any homework or anything to go back to the select board on, so I think that the numbers that, in effect, that I adjusted tonight are the numbers we'd be going with.
Okay, and Don, you're going to be waiting for the final, you think it's probably the same, but we don't know when that will happen exactly. When the commissioners, okay. And the Hopkinton precinct is final. So we have a meeting on the calendar for next Wednesday. And I guess I would propose that we hold that meeting. And what's that?
For food service.
Yes, and probably you should bring some food.
February 9th is at the school.
February 9th is currently at the school in the auditorium, yeah. And that one, unlike our regular budget committee meetings, that one starts at 7. That's what I have in my calendar.
At what time?
7 is what I have, but that strikes me as late.
It has been at 6.
6, I think, yeah. Well, I will confirm that time and we will get that sent out.
I'm gonna put it in for 6 right now.
Put it in for 6, yeah. So I would propose that we reconvene next week and we can start with the school if any of the administrators are going to be on to join us, which I imagine we'll need somebody around the food service discussion. And then we can go through, I would just ask you all to step us through a warrant article by warrant article for those warrants that need the budget committee discussion, and we'll have discussion and we will we'll see if we're ready to vote on where the budget committee stands. If there's anything where there's a lot of, which I haven't seen yet this year, but if there's anything where there's a lot of contention, we'll.
Could I ask that the town go first again for the same reason I asked?
Oh, yeah, yes, yeah, so, yes, thank you.
I don't want to say anything in
Yeah,
public session.
We'd like to accommodate the town and Neil being able to have the time that we need him here on the front end if possible. So as long as others are amenable, let's go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
Norm.
So what we'll do follow-up on your questions, make sure we unpack those appropriately. And then I would say the next thing we would do, we'd go warrant through warrant.
Yeah.
So we'll answer the question and then we'll do warrant by warrant and stuff. I did have a question about February 9th. More or less safety protocols, people had asked since we're a budget committee. How is the protocols over at your public hearing that the budget committee is holding regarding its mask, unmasked, and whatnot?
Yeah, well, I would invite you all to tell me what you would like to see, and then I would need to explore that with Neil, and, I'm not sure what actually we are allowed to do in terms of requirements.
Because I have people asking, and I
Yeah,
do not have that answer.
In the schools, isn't the policy masks mandated?
The policy is for masks during the day for teachers and students.
but whether that would apply to this meeting that's a question. I don't
That's a question that
understand.
I'd like to ask, because I can't.
Well, it's for all extracurricular activity, basketball and anything like that too.
Yeah, so that can be part of what I check with Neil on or the school to confirm what safety call. So what does the school require if they are hosting us? And we can confirm that and we can share that.
Isn't there a mask requirement in town? Buildings?
In this building at the Slusher Center,
Right.
yes, the school has their own rules.
So it may be that if we're in either a town building or a school building, that we're subject to mask mandate, which we would extend to the public.
Which we're a governing body of
The town.
the town, which is mandated in their facilities. But, I just wanted to make it clear because a lot of people have asked and I have not been given an answer. I've been told it's, the budget committee's meeting.
Well, let me ask all of you if folks have feelings that there may be simple requirements, so there may not be much to discuss.
Yeah.
But if there was discretion, well, let me find out what the requirements are.
Of course.
And then next week, if there's actually discretion, we can have a conversation about people's sentiments and where we would like to go. But if there's no wiggle room, then not much conversation to have. Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, can you just tell me what was your question, Norm, about the mask?
What are the safety protocols that we're gonna, what safety protocols will we use at the public hearing
The public hearing.
session on February 9th?
A simple question, is the town and school meeting been scheduled? Because I called Karen, she wasn't quite sure which was which.
Yes.
Is the town going first on the 12th or the school?
You go first and then we're going second. So 12th and 19th,
Okay,
isn't it?
good.
Or the 19th.
So town meeting is the 12th.
I believe it is 12th. Right?
Meeting is the 19th.
Thank you.
Ken's gonna look.
The town goes before the school.
Yeah,
What is the election day?
the 5th. March 5th? Yeah.
Then it's not the 12th.
And when
We're going on the 19th. I believe the election day is on the 5th.
5th is a Saturday.
Yeah, so the Saturday after election would be the town meeting and the following Saturday would be school.
So maybe the election's on the 8th.
Maybe the 8th, yes.
Yeah, so
And
then town meeting will be the 12th, and school meeting will be the 19th. Okay.
when is,
Sorry, I was also-
when is the sign up for people to run for office?
It starts next Wednesday.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that question. What else? Other business? Rich?
Okay, so we're getting together on next week on the 19th. Are we likely to get together either the next two following Wednesdays, the 26th or the 2nd? The only reason I'm asking is because I work 7-day weeks and I'm only here because of high school kids, which are notoriously unreliable. I can give them
I can
a
attest
week
to
or
that.
two ahead, it would be handy to know.
Yeah, I think that it really depends on how the conversation goes next week. We may well, I mean, I will just say, I haven't seen a lot, just in the comments and the conversation that we've had so far, we'll just say with the town and the school, two bigger budgets. I haven't heard a lot of hard questions or concerns expressed yet. And so it may be smooth sailing next week in terms of the budget committee's endorsement. But if we get hung up on any issues where we feel like we're not ready to vote or we want further information, it's conceivable, I guess we could have to schedule. Usually, I doubt both of them, but it's conceivable we might have to use one of those extra dates.
Thank you.
I think that's, and I would invite others, that's my perception so far.
Well, even next week would be a preliminary vote, right, until we have the public hearing?
Right, so we will, yes, so basically, we will vote on whether we endorse the budgets to be that are being presented at the public hearing. And then after the public hearing, we have to take our formal votes, which we typically do that evening, immediately after the public hearing. It's nice when we're in sync with the boards, but it hasn't always been the case. Any other business for tonight? Otherwise, we have a motion to adjourn. And Krista, all in favor? Opposed? Great, thank you. Thank you, Cindy.
So Mark, you should
Can I
have
ask-
signed up, Ken.
I'm sorry, I was writing.
Oh.
I didn't see.
Not really well. Yeah.
Ken motioned and Krista second.
Hey, Chelsea, do that
I
report.
mean. I
Your wife's doing
I mean, actually, I'm really.
Yeah, me too.
It wasn't.
So I'm gonna make my wife do it.
Yeah.
So she can do it. And.
Pretty good run.
You just want to bond the entire school budget, right?
I look forward to that.
Yeah, I'm all, I mean,